This video is probably the most important video on this channel. This will sound very strange, but the arrest of Jack Tejera on April 13th, the 21-year-old National Air Guardsman and classified document leaker, whose last name of Tejera is rooted in the Latin word for toxic, and the news of the massive explosion and fire and death of 18,000 cows on a farm in Texas on April 13th were prophetic signs among numerous prophetic signs from God that revealed adding 21 days to the day of the arrest of the 21-year-old whose name means toxic. For the purpose of revealing the date, it is predicted there will be a toxic dirty bomb explosion and mass evacuation on Manhattan Island on May 4th, 2023. And this date, May 4th, 5-4, which hints at the number 54, and the arrest of the document leaker in Massachusetts, are designed by God for the purpose of pointing to the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment in the Civil War, the first black regiment and turning point for victory for the Union Army in the Civil War. These prophetic signs and numerous other prophetic signs that will be explained in this video are predicting that a dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan in New York City on September 25th, 2023. And there will be a massive evacuation of Manhattan Island. It is also likely that the official narrative in the mainstream media that will emerge regarding this event will somehow be a lie. The date that this video is posted proves that this prediction was made ahead of time, as does this timestamped email and forensic notes PDF. If you are skeptical, please email me and I will forward these to you. Although it has been known since early 2021 that a dirty bomb would explode in Manhattan in the near future, as you can see in this email, this prediction for a dirty bomb explosion in Manhattan on September 25th was known since at least June 19th. There are also many other videos on this channel that make this prediction that were posted many days before this video was posted. This video was produced prior to May 4th, 2023. If you want to understand and appreciate how the prediction that a dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan, New York City on September 25th, 2023 is known ahead of time, it is imperative that we learn about the numerous prophetic signs that occurred on April 13th, 2023. April 13th was the climactic penultimate date in the trail of signs that is leading to the predicted date for the dirty bomb explosion and mass evacuation from Manhattan Island on September 25th, 2023. The prophetic signs on April 13th in turn pointed to May 4th. May 4th, or the date 5-4, as we now know, hints at the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment, the first black regiment in the Civil War, and the reason God has used this theme is because it conveys the theme of slavery and freedom, which is the overarching theme of the Bible and of this life, and the current end times spiritual battle, the battle to end all battles that we are all involved in right now. This is why, for example, on April 13th, the S&P 500 stock index gained 54 points, and the prophetic hockey game involving the team from Massachusetts had a final score of 5-4, which hinted at the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. This is also why, on April 13th, the 21-year-old document leaker was arrested in Massachusetts 21 days before the date 5-4, which hints at 54. And one of the signs we received on the date 5-4 was the passage of the law in the 12th state to join the Union, restricting abortion to 12 weeks, which hints at 12 times 12 days added to the date 5-4, which leads to September 25th. Arguably, the most important video on this channel, at least in regards to the prediction of the dirty bomb in Manhattan, is the 54th Massachusetts Regiment video. Once the prediction comes to pass, you should know that all of the videos on this channel should be watched. However, there are a few top videos, such as the 54th Massachusetts Regiment video, the East Palestine video, the Obama Returns to the White House video, the 3 Mile Island accident video, and the Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory video. As you watch this video that you are currently watching, keep in mind that it was produced before May 4th, when it was believed that it would be the date of the predicted dirty bomb in Manhattan. However, like I said, April 13th turned out to be the penultimate date in the trail of signs that led to May 4th and is leading to September 25th. Alright, this video here will explain the amazing prophetic signs that occurred on April 13th, 2023, and so much more, many other signs on many other dates. April 13th was, if you will, the penultimate date in the trail of signs that is leading to the predicted date that a dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan and a mass evacuation of Manhattan Island on May 4th, 2023. In order to bring all of what God has done through his big picture of signs and through, for example, the signs that occurred on April 13th, it will be required that I tell this somewhat like a story, like a movie, if you will. And like a movie, the plot develops with time, leading to the climax. As you will see, the story that God is telling through this big picture of signs that funnels through April 13th, it is a beautiful story and big picture that I will attempt to paint. And so what I am trying to say is that there are a number of points of interest that will eventually converge into one thing. So let's just begin. I'm going to begin with the emails that I wrote to some friends regarding the prophetic signs that occurred on April 13th. This was my analysis the following day. And to prove this, here we can see the date that this email was sent. It was sent on April 14th, the day after the prophetic signs on April 13th. And so I wrote to begin with, there were numerous prophetic signs on April 13th. I now believe that there are two categories of dates. And what I'm referring to is predicted dates, dates in the big picture of God's prophetic signs. Some dates are super dates, if you will. This is my new conclusion here. There are such as, for example, these dates here, November 3rd, 2022, December 13th, 2022, December 18th, 2022, January 31st, 2023, July 13th, 2019, May 27th, 2018, June 16th, 2019, March 11th, 2020, May 23rd, 2021, and November 4th, 2021, just for some examples. So there is so much going on, it's hard to know where to begin. First, the explosion sign was the news of the explosion in the barn and the fire that killed 18,000 cows. God uses the number 18 in his big picture of signs to hint at 6 plus 6 plus 6, which is 666, and the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. The explosion and fire was on Monday. However, this became news on April 13th because of the sheriff's announcement regarding the record number of cow deaths. So the mainstream media, no one had heard of this story prior to April 13th. And the reason why it suddenly became a story, even though it was a few days after the actual event, was because of the astonishing number of cows that had died, which was announced by the sheriff. And it was an official statement from the sheriff. And so that's why this prophetic sign is an April 13th prophetic sign. And, of course, prior to April 13th, It was expected that there would be such a sign. In fact, the overwhelming evidence indicated that the dirty bomb would explode on April 13th. However, God was not done developing his big picture of signs, and April 13th ended up being another step, the penultimate step in the trail of signs that is leading to the ultimate date that the dirty bomb will explode, the predicted date, which is May 4th. So anyway, the point is that we were expecting such a sign in advance, and this is huge. It was an explosion. The sheriff, as I wrote here, he speculated that the explosion was likely caused by methane gas. So this event was an explosion. In other words, it hinted at a bomb. It hinted at mass deaths. I don't know how many deaths there will be in the dirty bomb. But anyway, it included a big number, and it was Antichrist symbolism. And let's go on. However, this became news on the April 13th. The top story of the day on April 13th was the arrest of the document leaker. The 21-year-old document leaker that leaked the documents that revealed the truth regarding the war in Ukraine, for which the media has focused on the actual leaking and not any attention at all on the fact that the government was lying to us about the actualities of the war in Ukraine. But that is such is the leftist mainstream media today, which essentially works for the State Department. So the document leaker's name is Tahera. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. I apologize. I think that's how you pronounce it. But Tahera, which is a name which comes from, this name is rooted in, the origin of this surname is rooted in the yew tree. That's the English word for this name. But in the Romance languages, his first name is Jack, by the way. So it's Jack Tahera. So anyway, his surname is the yew tree, but in the Romance languages, with the exception of French, and also in the Slavic languages, the name for this tree retained a form of its Latin name, taxus, which comes from the same root word as toxic. So in English, we get the word toxic from this word taxus. And in the Romance languages, the name for this tree has a derivative of this word taxus, or is a derivative of it. In other words, the name Tahera means toxic. The reason is because this tree is known for being poisonous. Even a small amount of the tree, if eaten, it will result in death. Likewise, if one eats the seeds of its berries. If you eat the seeds of this berries or even eat just a little bit of the foliage, you will die. That's why this tree is toxic, and that's why in the Romance languages, the name essentially means toxic for this tree. Which is why we have Tahera, because these two signs together give us toxic explosion symbolism, which is what a dirty bomb is. That's why this is astounding that all of this happened on the predicted date that was predicted in advance, April 13th. And although it was just a step in the trail, all of the analysis for April 13th was 100% confirmed with these big news stories of the day, because this is essentially hitting at, of course, a dirty bomb explosion. Okay. Even small amounts of radiation from nuclear material can result in death. The mass death of cows hints at a mass death of people. I also believe that the purpose of the document leaker regarding the war in Ukraine is a hint that the toxic material for the dirty bomb, the plutonium, will be leaked out of Ukraine. The leaked U.S. intelligence documents story is symbolism for the breach of the walls of security of America. Before the walls of security of Jericho collapsed in God's judgment, the Hebrews marched 7 times while 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. It was a march for once per 7 days, and then on the 7th day they marched 7 times while the 7 trumpets were blown. It was a 3 sets of 7, which is what God uses in his big picture of science frequently, because the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment on Jericho. Which is why the biggest part of this story, of this arrest, of this leaker, the document leaker, is his young age of 21 years old. The biggest part of this story is how this young 21-year-old National Air Guardsman was able to access such high-level classified documents and steal them. That was the big story. It was like, okay, the documents were stolen, but wait a second, how in the world did the 21-year-old be able to do that, right? Okay, in other words, and 21, of course, is 3 sets of 7. In other words, God was pointing to the number 21, which is 3 sets of 7. Furthermore, the Hebrews blew trumpets after marching 7 times. And trump, God's trumpet that God uses to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs, on this same day, April 13th, gave 7 hours of deposition in Manhattan on this April 13th date. So the 7 hours hints at the 3 sets of 7, of course, and trump is God's trumpet. And for example, that's why his presidency and election campaign were synonymous with his border wall of security, because the Hebrews blew trumpets before the walls of security collapsed on Jericho in God's judgment. Now, Trump is the 45th president, and 45, the number, is the 9th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 9th row is 45. And 45 is a multiple of 9, and also it hints at 4 plus 5 equals 9. The number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, as from the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. Trump's deposition on April 13th was 9 days after his arraignment on the date 4/4. Okay, and both of these events of Trump in the courtroom were in Manhattan, which is the location predicted to be of the dirty bomb. As explained before, both dates hint at Nisan 13. Okay, so the date 4/4 in 2023 is literally in the Hebrew calendar, Nisan 13, the 13th day of the month of Nisan in the Hebrew calendar. April 13th hinted at Nisan 13 because it was the 13th day of the month, and April is roughly the month of Nisan in the Hebrew calendar. And so that was it. That was predicted before. And so we have this, and it was also mentioned before how it was relevant to Trump's arraignment. And it wasn't known, of course, at the time that Trump would be giving a deposition in Manhattan of 7 hours on this on April 13th, the date it hints at Nisan 13. The reason why God is pointing to Nisan 13 is because that's the day that the decree, the laws from Haman in Persia in the book of Esther in the Bible were decreed. That was the date of the decree, which were laws that persecuted God's people, the minority, the Jews in Persia. As I wrote, as this is symbolic of the persecution of God's people. Okay. 18,000 cows hints at the Antichrist, which was again on the same day of this Nisan 13 date. Revelation 6:4, quote, "And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth so that people should slay one another. And he was given a great sword," unquote. So, that is hinting at the Antichrist. That will be like it says in this verse, the the rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, and so he encourages or he enables the people should slay one another, okay? There's much more to be said regarding that. That's explained in other videos. I don't want to get too deep and philosophical and political at this time. And actually, the 18,000 cows was a slaughter of the cows, and this was 42 days after the Boston Bruins slaughtered the hockey team from Buffalo, which hinted at the slaughter of the buffalo. This will be explained later, and 42 days in the Bible. And the number 42 in the Bible is symbolism for slaughter. There were 42 cities that were refuges for people that had committed manslaughter. 42 descendants of King Ahab were slaughtered at the pit by the men of King Jehu, and 42 boys were slaughtered by the bear in 2 Kings. And Bruins, Boston Bruins, are bears, and they slaughtered the buffalo. But anyway, this will be explained more, but the point here is the prophetic significance of the 18,000 cows, and 18 is used because it is 6 plus 6 plus 6, which hints at the Antichrist and the upcoming slaughter and ongoing slaughter of God's people. Okay, so Mason pointed out that the three initials of the document leaker, Jack Douglas Tahara and Donald J. Trump, are the same. So that's a parallel that confirms the signs here. One reason why this is to tie together what I just explained. Also, exactly 444 months before Jack was arrested was the day that Jack Nicklaus won the 50th Masters tournament in Augusta and received $144,000 for winning. Now, let's see. Okay, so I write a little more here. So 144 equals 9 times 4 times 4, which hints at judgment by the 44th Antichrist through the 44th president, right? Who was born in August, and like Caesar Augustus in 22 BC, in God's big picture of signs, the number 22 is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist. I explained it so many times, I'll just do it one more time. So the Tav mark in Ezekiel chapter 9, the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist is described, and the mark in Ezekiel chapter 9 would have been a Tav mark. The Tav letter in the Hebrew alphabet is the last letter and the 22nd letter in the alphabet. And the mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, the 22nd out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. Anyway, this is confirmed overwhelmingly in his signs. So anyway, Caesar Augustus in 22 BC, the Antichrist, like Caesar Augustus in 22 BC, will also be given dictatorial powers over the food supply. And the mark of the Antichrist, which will be used to, the food, the disabling of people's ability to purchase food, if they don't take the mark of the will be the result of not taking the mark of the Antichrist. Okay, so in other words, what's going to happen is that if you don't take the mark of the Antichrist, you won't be able to buy or sell food. That's what's described in Bible prophecy, and that's what happened in 22 BC with Augustus. He had the dictatorial powers over the food supply, just like the Antichrist will have dictatorial powers over the food supply, which is why, essentially, Barack Obama was born in August, because it hints at Caesar Augustus. And let's see. So the 50th Masters, the Masters also hints at the Antichrist, the name Masters. 50 is extremely prophetic in the Bible, 50 years. This is the 50th Masters tournament. And 144,000 is extremely prophetic in the book of Revelation, but like I just explained, it also identifies the Antichrist, the 44th president, judgment, 9 times 4 times 4. And also the 144,000 in the book of Revelation is symbolism for God's people that will be spared and rescued from the persecution of the Antichrist. And so that is why the connection to the 50th tournament of Jack Nicklaus. So the 50th Masters Tour equals 50, which equals the church. Because the the Feast of Pentecost is symbolism for the church, and Pentecost literally means 50th. And that's why in God's signs, the number 50 symbolizes the church. Nicholas is one of many, many men God has used in his big picture of prophetic signs to hint at the Nicolaitan doctrine that in the book of Revelation, Jesus said that he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. And that doctrine is precisely identified in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections as only being explained on this channel. And it is explained in other videos. So anyway, you need to watch the 23 church prophetic signs video on this channel, arguably the most important video on this channel, especially if you are already a Christian. And so that's why Jack Nicklaus here, okay? And that's why the context of the church and the $144,000 that he won, which as I just explained is also symbolism for those that will be raptured, those that will be spared the tribulation, and those that have the Nicolaitan doctrine will not be. That's the point, in fact. Okay? So, and the vast majority of Christians, including evangelical Christians, have the Nicolaitan doctrine and the Nicolaitan works that are a product of this Nicolaitan doctrine. I have decided to take 1 minute of time here to name the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day that Jesus said he hates, that has been overwhelmingly identified through God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. And when the prediction comes to pass that is being made in this video, it will prove that this is the truth regarding what precisely is the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day. And make no mistake, this is the purpose of this prediction that is from God. It is to confirm for you what I am saying is true regarding what is specifically the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day, which is sovereign grace and free grace, Reformed theology, which comes in the packages of Calvinism and dispensationalism, which both lead to the heretical Gnostic doctrine of once saved, always saved, and the myth, as evangelicals understand it, of imputed righteousness. Our righteousness is as filthy rags, one verse that Luther took out of context and twisted to support his entire theology. All Christians will be raptured. Predestination. The horrible concept that God knows ahead of time who, before they are born, will be going to heaven and hell. Make sure that you watch the 23 church signs video on this channel. It is very important that we understand these things because whether you know it or not, your theology is dictated by doctrine, what you believe, how you conduct yourself. You may not even have been aware that you have these doctrines. You might say to yourself in a simplistic way, I just love Jesus. This is called anti-intellectualism, the belief that one's ignorance is equal to another person's knowledge. But these doctrines, this Nicolaitan doctrine, Reformed theology, which even Catholics, modern Catholics, have incorporated into their theology today, is the root of the bad fruit from the bad tree that is the church that Jesus is very, very displeased with. And this displeasure for the church is the reason why the end times are now, and that the Antichrist and Antichrist system are coming now. It is judgment for the church. As Peter said, judgment begins with the church. The word Nicolaitan is derived from two Greek words that mean ruling over the laity. The reason why these bad doctrines have been institutionalized over the centuries is because of this unequal brotherhood, this clergy and laity organization within the church, which is rooted in paid pastors and priests, which Jesus strictly forbid. Pastors are the problem. They are the gatekeepers of the doctrine, and no one would have this doctrine were it not for the business of church, the institutionalized church that is funded with money. This is why Jesus forbid this. This is why we have countless denominations today. If there were no money involved in the church, people would be reading the Bible for themselves, and there would be no opportunity to entrench and institutionalize these man-made doctrines. The Catholic Church is a great example, but Protestant denominations do the same thing. You can see within the Catholic Church how it has become more corrupt with time, with more and more man-made doctrine with time that has been institutionalized and empowered through the money that the Catholic Church receives. And those that give their money to pastors are also part of the problem. Those that play the game of going to church and the ritual of Christianity are also part of the problem. This is the problem. It is the root of the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day, which means ruling over the laity. Pastors are regular, ordinary Christians. They are not authorities, and that's the other thing. Jesus forbid calling anyone your authority or your teacher. He is the only teacher. And when we only pay attention to Jesus' words, which pastors conveniently ignore the vast majority of the time, we do not need pastors. So, the reason why the middle name of Jack Tahara is Douglas is because this points to the Nicholas Cruz shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Broward County, Florida. Which is why on the same April 13th date, the governor of Florida declared a state of emergency for Broward County due to a once in 1,000 years rain total of 25 inches in 24 hours. The Parkland High School shooting was 1,884 days, 1,884 days before this severe weather in Broward County and unprecedented flooding in Broward County. Okay? 1884 hints at 18 and 84. 18 equals 6 plus 6 plus 6, the number of the Antichrist. And 84 hints at the date 8/4, August 4th, the date that Barack Obama was born. And by the way, is the 216th day of the calendar year, and 216 is 6 times 6 times 6. This is why on this same April 13th date, we had another prophetic sign in Florida that pointed to the year 1884, which I will explain in a minute. And that is amazing because it confirms this 1884 days connection between the shooting in Broward County and this extremely prophetic, unprecedented, epic flooding in Broward County that caused a state of emergency to be declared. And if you follow the story at all, the shutting down of the Fort Lauderdale airport and many things. And as was just explained, this same April 13th date was the day of the 18,000 cows prophetic sign, a slaughter, which was 42 days after the Boston Bruins slaughtered the Buffalo hockey team. And 42 is symbolism for slaughter, as was explained. And now we can see that this April 13th signs, including the Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Broward County, once in 1,000 years flooding, is pointing to the slaughter at the Parkland, Florida high school shooting in Broward County. And also on this same day, the state of Florida legislature passed a new law restricting abortions to 6 weeks, which is 42 days, which is why all of this is being pointed to, including the shooting in Parkland, the Parkland, Florida high school shooting. It's all judgment, including high school shootings have been judgment from God for abortions, which I will explain actually a little later in this video too. But the point is that abortions are a slaughter. Okay. Also, Trump was born exactly 860 months before the Parkland shooting during his presidency. The Parkland shooting was during his presidency. Trump was born exactly 860 months before, which is the deadliest high school shooting in history. G86, which is the 86th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance, is the word Hades and hell. And the 86th word in the Hebrew Concordance is the word to kneel. This is very Antichrist. And of course, the shooting is very Antichrist. There's much more to that shooting, by the way, which I've explained so many other times. There were 17 people injured and 17 people that were killed. And 2018 was 17 years after 9/11, and the shooting was exactly 144,000 hours after 9/11, when the two planes struck the two towers 17 minutes apart. And also the Christchurch massacre shooting in Christchurch, New Zealand, was 50 killed and 50 injured, which hints at the church. And that shooting was infamous for its 17 minutes of live video footage that was streamed onto social media, which led to the Christchurch call to action, which was a meeting of leaders from 17 nations to discuss how to censor the internet, which is, of course, all about how to censor conservatives and Christians on the internet. And this Christchurch call to action of leaders from 17 nations was exactly 2 months after the two mosques shooting that involved the 17 minutes of live video footage. Shootings also hint at shots and the mark of the Antichrist. So many of the mass shootings have in fact also been symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist. Okay, because of the SHOTs. It's symbolism for it, if you know what I'm talking about. This is another reason for the connection between Jack Douglas Tejera and Donald J. Trump on April 13th. The record 25 inches of rain, the reason by the way again is because Trump is connected to the shooting because of the exact 886 months, and as I just explained, the shooting connects to Trump in New York on April 13th because of the flooding in Broward County on April 13th, right? That's how it all threads together. That's how God's big picture of signs works. It works on these principles of second and third multiple witnesses that confirm a matter. And by the way, that's what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs on the internet. Okay, so the record 25 inches of rain in 24 hours at the Fort Lauderdale airport, which shattered the old record of 14 inches, hints at the 25th Amendment that will be used to appoint the Antichrist as the president. Fort Lauderdale is known for its beach. This is probably a stretch, but Jack Tahara was arrested in Dighton, and Fort Lauderdale is known for its beach. And so this could hint at the letter D and B, which hint at dirty bomb. But as well, during the unprecedented rain, there were 2 tornadoes in Dania Beach in Broward County. Dania Beach gives us a D and a B for dirty bomb. The tornadoes damaged about 10 homes in the French-Canadian Snowbird area. And I saw a news clip of that. The reporters were in the neighborhood interviewing people cleaning up, the residents, and they were clearly French Canadians. And I think they even said so in the news. But there's a good reason why this is the case. As these French Canadians were getting ready to head back north for the summer. They're snowbirds. They migrate, in other words. This migration of people from Quebec to Florida hints at the exodus from Montreal, Quebec. And on April 13th, the hockey game of the Boston Bruins in Montreal was prophetic. So I can't explain it here because it's impossible to explain God's big picture of signs all at once. We're going to go through it slowly here. But there is another video that explains this amazing thing that the story that God was telling, which is how the exodus of the Anglophones from Montreal in the late 70s to Toronto and Mississauga was a parallel with the exodus of the Hebrews out of Egypt that were oppressed in Egypt due to by the Antichrist, the type for the Antichrist, Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, with oppressive minority laws, which is the exact same reason why the Anglophones migrated away, exodus from Montreal Island, due to the oppressive language rights minority law. Okay? So that's explained in other videos. But this is the thing here, is that these French Canadians were getting ready to go back and make their migration back to Montreal. And that's extremely relevant because of everything else that God was doing involving this story about Montreal that was used to point to April 13th and likewise the predicted date of the dirty bomb and the evacuation from Manhattan Island. In other words, the upcoming mass evacuation from Manhattan Island is pointed to or is hinted at with the evacuation from the bomb train in Mississauga, and the residents of Mississauga were largely there because of the exodus evacuation from Montreal. See, it all ties together. It's a really big picture, and I'm doing my best to explain it all. But there's so much more to that. I've made a 3-hour video regarding that, and it is absolutely a must watch. So that's enough of explaining that for now. But the point is that this occurred, these 2 tornadoes were and tornadoes make this prophetic as well. But these 2 tornadoes occurred in Dania Beach. And that's why I'm saying it may not be a stretch for the D and B analysis here that hints at dirty bomb. In fact, it seems like it isn't. All right, so Jack Douglas Tahara is a member of the 102nd Intelligence Wing of the National Air Guardsmen. This hints at his age of 21. The 102 hints at 21, which is more confirmation for this being the important number in this sign. Additionally, the connection to Trump confirms this 3 sets of 7 symbolism, because Trump is all about symbolically the walls of security collapsing on Jericho after the trumpets were blown, right? In archaic English, the word trump means trumpet, or the sounding of a trumpet. And so, like, again, as I said, he gave deposition for 7 hours on this day of Jack Douglas Tahara, same initials. And Jack Douglas Tahara is 21 years old, which is 3 sets of 7. It's absolutely astounding how God makes his big picture of signs true and not just the product of one's imagination. This is why these signs on April 13th were a step in the trail of signs leading to the predicted dirty bomb explosion and evacuation of Manhattan Island on May 4th, 2023. The other connections to May 4th, 2023 overwhelmingly confirm this. I'm referring to things that aren't in this email. It is surprising that April 13th was a step and not the event itself. God was not finished. One reason is because the leaked document story is about the information concerning the Ukraine war. God used this to further confirm that the nuclear material for the dirty bomb will be leaked out of Ukraine. There is no doubt regarding this at this point. America's involvement in Ukraine, going back decades, has brought this disaster on itself. Okay, and that was also part of the story, was how it was revealed that the information that the American public had about Ukraine, I should say the masses, the ones that get their news from the mainstream media, was a lie. Those that don't, those that are think it is important to be informed and know that the mainstream media is a bunch of lies and works for the State Department, knew already these lies, okay? But the vast majority of Americans didn't know. And so that was a big part of the story. But then again, if you are getting your news from the mainstream media, you might not even have recognized that, because the mainstream media was distracting you like the deceiving devil into how what a travesty, what a catastrophe it was that the 21-year-old was able to get the documents. Never mind that everything is a lie. Okay. So I always get tempted to go into a political diatribe here because, well, that's important and it's unrighteous, and that's ultimately what this is all about, right? And what life is all about, right? Truth and righteousness. That's the God of the Bible, and it is that God that is making these prophetic signs. And so I need to, I guess, interject here and there the deeper meaning behind all of these things. Okay, and America's involvement in Ukraine goes back decades. This war was brought on by America. This war is a result of America. And if you don't know that, you really don't know very much. No offense. But, there's all kinds of information that, and I mean that in a derogatory way, because this is information that could have been known, if you don't know it, many, many years ago, decades ago. NATO's push into Ukraine and the coup in 2014 and everything. Okay, so let's move on. Actually, a couple more things. Ukraine was used, like everything else these days, as a land for corruption for Americans, for American politicians. It was the great money laundering, and still is. It's no coincidence that the cryptocurrency guy, Ponzi scheme guy, was involved in Ukraine and was largely the guy that liberals did their crypto with, because crypto for the blue team seemed to them, in their bigoted cultural war, to be a right-wing thing, so they needed a liberal guy to do it. And anyway, that was the guy, and all the liberals were in with this guy because, well, crypto is a conservative Republican type of thing. Ew. And anyway, so the land of Ukraine is one big money laundering place for the Democrat Party, for one thing, and all kinds of other corruption as well, including the U.S.-funded bioweapons labs in Ukraine, which is all corruption within the Department of Defense. And we could really go on, but the coup in 2014 was instigated by, it was a U.S. coup of the government in Ukraine. And anyway, Ukraine is a mess. It's a complete mess. It's currently ruled by various Nazi factions in many parts of the country, and it's a big lie, and it's a civil war, and we should have nothing to do with it. And furthermore, the whole reason for its war is because of NATO's push into Ukraine, which it never should have done, but this was done by liberals in their supreme arrogance, and we should not be involved, America should not be involved in such things. Anyway, enough said. There's lots of other information regarding Ukraine if you would like to know the truth about it elsewhere on the internet. Another confirmation of this 21 days connection to April 13th to May 4th is that the announcement that a deal was reached for the state was the announcement that a deal was reached for the sale of the Washington, D.C. football team to the group of investors led by Josh Harris. Josh hints at Joshua and 3 sets of 7. The sale is for a record $6.05 billion. On 9/11, the Dow was closed at 9,605. The 605 hinted at 6 plus 5 equals 11, which made the Dow number on 9/11 hint at 9/11. By the way, for that matter, the S&P futures contract was frozen at 9/11 during the events of 9/11. Josh Harris owns the Philadelphia 76ers, which is symbolism for the American church. God uses the city of Philadelphia in his signs for this symbolism. And he owns the New Jersey Devils. The Los Angeles Kings, which hints at fallen angels, because Los Angeles is Spanish for the angels, beat the Devils in 2012, 12 years before the devil will be defeated at the second coming of the King of Kings, hence the Los Angeles Kings. The name of, that's another story. I just thought I would just put that in there. But it's relevant because Josh Harris is involved here. The name Josh Harris, the name of Josh Harris's investment group is Apollo. The $605 billion his group is paying hints at 11, and therefore this hints at Apollo 11. Apollo 11 was the first time that an American set foot on the moon, and the moon symbolizes Christ. This is beyond overwhelmingly demonstrated by God through his prophetic signs. But philosophically, the sun is too bright, symbolizes God the Father, and the sun's light is too bright for us to gaze at, but we can gaze at the sun's light reflected off of the moon. And furthermore, the moon is a giant rock, and in the Bible, rock symbolizes Jesus. And watching the moon, which is described in the Bible, the importance of watching the moon, symbolizes the watching of the prophetic signs of the Lord's return and his timing, the timing of his return. For those that still believe the misinterpretation and mistranslation of the most quoted verse in the Bible, Matthew 24:36, no one knows the day, it's incorrect. The timing of the Lord's return is possible. The knowledge that the timing is the ability to know that the timing is possible has been hidden. And anyway, that's another subject, but the prediction in this video will prove this. That's the purpose of this prediction. And furthermore, the purpose of this prediction in this video is to prove all of the controversial things that I am stating in this video. That is the purpose of the prediction. And there would be no purpose for this prediction from God if that weren't the purpose. And there would be no purpose for this video or this video channel. This is the purpose of this prediction. It is to prove the controversial, the main things, the main conclusions that are controversial that I am saying. The main conclusions that are derived from God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which will be proven to be true, as explained on this channel, once the prediction comes to pass. You know, that's how prophecy works. Jesus said to those that didn't believe him, if you don't believe what I am saying, then believe the works that I am doing, right? And that's why 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy. It's for the purpose of God proving himself. And so, okay, so where was I? So the moon symbolizes Christ. Josh, 3 sets of 7, owner of the Apollo Global Management, Apollo 13. So, okay, so Josh hints at 3 sets of 7. He's the owner of the Apollo Global Management company or whatever. firm, and that hints at Apollo 11. They paid they are paying 605 billion, 11, hints at 11, 3 sets of 7 days before May 4th. And May 4th hints at 5 plus 4 equals 9. Thus, this is a pairing of 9 and 11 that confirms this 21 days connection. So that's how God's big picture of signs works. He pairs numbers together. This is the easy, simple way to provide a second, third witness, which is what the Bible says is required to confirm a matter. And he pairs 9 and 11 together. And so this is how this connection is confirmed, because this sale is symbolized by the number 11 because of Apollo 11 and the 6.05 billion. And it connects to this date with 3 sets of 7, Josh, which hints at 9. Okay, 5-4 hints at 5 plus 4 equals 9. It also hints at 54, which is a multiple of 9. God uses multiples of 9s to symbolize the number 9. And so that's why we have a pairing of 9 and 11 here. And it confirms this 21 days connection. 21 days from the document leaker that was 21 years old as well. Apollo is from the same root as Apollyon, which is in Revelation chapter 9, which also means father of destruction in the 9th chapter of Revelation, which is another reason why this connection to the destruction okay, so Apollyon means, this is the name in Revelation chapter 9, which is symbolism for Satan. And he's the father of destruction, described in Revelation chapter 9. And this is another reason why this connection to the predicted destruction on the date 5-4, which hints at the number 9. Okay, Magic Johnson, the famous basketball player Magic Johnson, is a part of this group, the Apollo group. And his jersey number, 32, is another way of pointing to Obama's basketball jersey, 23. Obama will be the basketball antichrist. He was the basketball president, and he will be the basketball antichrist in Washington, D.C. Magic Johnson's purchase of the football team is the team from Washington, D.C., and this connection to 5-4, which hints at 9, is a pairing of 9 and 23, because 32 hints at 23. And God frequently pairs 9 and 23 together, just for one thing, because the basketball president who wore jersey 23 in high school became president in 2009. Okay. And also the mark of the Antichrist is symbolized in the 9th chapter of Ezekiel, and it affects one's 23 chromosomes. That's why 9 and 23 pair together to hint also at the mark of the Antichrist. Obama will be the basketball Antichrist in Washington, D.C. As well, the other MJ, Michael Jordan, wore 23, and 5-4, which hints at 9, will be 23 days after Michael Jordan's shoes sold, Air Jordan shoes, sold for a record. God uses records in his big picture of signs to confirm that it is a sign. Sold for a record at auction on the same day as the toxic fire and evacuation in Indiana. The pair of shoes sold for $2.2 million on the same day that the body cam video footage of the 2 policemen in Louisville was released, on the same day that 2,000 residents were evacuated from the toxic fire, which hints at the dirty bomb and evacuation in Indiana. A pair of days, a pair of shoes, 2.2 million, 2,000 residents evacuated, 2 policemen. A pair of days, this was on April 11th, a pair of days before the other MJ, Magic Johnson, bought the Washington team on April 13th, which makes this a pair of MJs, Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson. Jack Douglas Tejera was arrested in North Dighton, which is part of Dighton in southeastern Massachusetts. Historically, Dighton was at a crossroads for travel. The Old Bristol Trail was used by the Pilgrims in the Plymouth colony to reach Massasoit's home in what is today Rhode Island. Dighton is known for the historic Dighton Rock. A large rock with petroglyphs on it is now in the Dighton State Park Museum. So it's actually, the Dighton Rock State Park Museum. This hints at the historic Plymouth Rock, where the Pilgrims first landed in their New Jerusalem and Promised Land. Plymouth Rock is symbolism for the rock in the Bible that symbolizes Jesus Christ, and the spiritual foundation of America, which was when the Pilgrims landed. Dighton was also where the ferry was for crossing the Taunton River. In the tricentennial celebration of Dighton in 2012, the residents dressed in historic costumes and ferried themselves across the river from Dighton to Ferry Landing. This reenactment of the ferry crossings in 2012 hints at the area code 212, and the coming predicted ferrying of people across the Hudson River in the evacuation on May 4th, 2023. It also, for that matter, hints at the ferrying of people escaping Lower Manhattan on 9/11. Another sign that pointed to that was the Captain Scully landing of the commercial passenger plane in the Hudson River and the boats coming to rescue the passengers on the wings of the plane. That was also adjacent to Lower Manhattan. I will now explain the other sign in Florida on April 13th, as it involves Boston and therefore is symbolic of judgment on America. I will now explain the other sign in Florida on April 13th, as it involves Boston and therefore is symbolic of judgment on America. Tampa Bay is symbolism for lightning. The region is known for its frequent lightning storms, and their hockey team is named Lightning. In the Bible, lightning is symbolism for the Antichrist. Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven, and the name Barack Obama in Hebrew means lightning from heaven. Barak in Hebrew means lightning. Bama is the word for high place, which in the Bible is a metaphor for heaven. And the word from in Aramaic, the language Jesus would have spoken, is O. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven. Either Jesus didn't know what he was saying when he said this, or he knew that there would be a famous president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, knowing that it would confuse us, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. And so Jesus revealed the identity of the Antichrist, and those that are still playing the guessing game, the Antichrist identity guessing game, are mistaken. And that is due to a false interpretation of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and what they claim to be the Holy Spirit, which is not, but this is explained in other videos, many other times. Okay, so the Hebrew word for lightning is Barak, and it is H1300 in Strong's Hebrew Old Testament Concordance. As well, from the Bible, the number 13 is symbolism for the Antichrist. For example, Nimrod, a type for the Antichrist, was the 13th generation from Ham. Haman, another type for the Antichrist, persecuted the Jews in Persia on the 13th days of the month. And the two Antichrists are described in the book of Revelation in chapter 13. This is why on this 13th of the month, on April 13th, the Tampa Bay baseball team reached a record of 13 wins and 0 losses. tying the modern era record. They tied the record for longest winning streak to begin a season. 13 wins out of 13 games. The Tampa Bay Rays were formerly named the Devil Rays, which is more Antichrist symbolism. This game was played against the team from Boston. This was the same day that Jack Tejera was arrested in Dighton, near Boston. Prior to the Boston Tea Party, there was the Molasses Affair protest in Dighton. It involved 63 casks of molasses reported to the British Customs Office for taxation. The Boston Bruins recently broke the record for most wins in a season with their 63rd win, which was extremely prophetic, which I will explain later. The nation was founded on 13 colonies after the Boston Tea Party, and for that matter, the Molasses Affair. On April 13th, Jack Tejera was arrested near Boston at 1:30 p.m. 1:30 p.m. hints at 13. On this same day that Jack Tejera was arrested near Boston, the Boston baseball team lost to Tampa Bay, who won their 13th game out of their first 13 games of the season, which is hinting at also the most wins in a season. That's the connection there. Not only is it both teams from Boston involved in this, but it's the season. It's a season record. The most wins ever in a season was achieved by the Boston Bruins this year, just 4 days before April 13th, for that matter. And also, the Tampa Bay Rays beat the Boston Red Sox and made a record, or tied the record, for the longest winning streak to begin a season. Okay? They became the third team in modern history to win their first 13 games, which is the modern era record. The third team to win their first 13 games hints at 3 divided by 13 equals 0.230, which hints at Obama, whose number is 23. The final score of this prophetic game confirmed the relevance of becoming the third team to win their first 13 games. And the score was 3-9, which hints at 39, which is 3 times 13. I'll just repeat that. This isn't the first time that God has used 3 and 13 together to hint at 3 divided by 13, including the date 313. And 3 divided by 13 hints at 0.230. There aren't any other dates or pairings of numbers that really can do that. It's astounding. Obama's number is 23, and he wore this number when he played basketball, and he's the basketball president. But the point is that this is all Antichrist symbolism. We were talking about the lightning Tampa Bay Devil Rays, and for example, and the number 13, which, as I just explained, is symbolism for the Antichrist, and the 13 wins. So they won 13 games in a row, but they were the third team to do it. But it was a tying of the record. There were 2 other teams for a total of 3. And so that's a straightforward 3 and 13. But not only that, the score in the game was 39, or 3-9, which hints at 39, which is 3 times 13, which totally confirms this. It's astounding. The other 2 teams to win their first 13 games were the Milwaukee Brewers in 1987 and the Atlanta Braves in 1982. The 2023 Tampa Bay Rays were the first to win their first 13 games in 36 years. And the number 36 is symbolism for the Antichrist, because 36 is 6 times 6, but also 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And the 36th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666. And 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. And that's why 36 years connections in God's big picture of science. This isn't by far the only one. But this Tampa Bay Rays in 2023 were the first team to win 13 games of the first 13 games of the season in 36 years. The two other teams, as I just said, were the Brewers and the Braves. And these were the two teams that the home run king, Hank Aaron, played for. 13 games is 117 innings. Hank Aaron, the home run king, baseball, died 6 plus 6 plus 6 days, Antichrist symbolism, after taking the mark of the Antichrist on January 4th, 2021, which was the first day of the 117th Congress, which opened with, for the first time ever, a blasphemous prayer to pagan gods instead of the God of the Bible. January 14th, 2021 was in turn 117 days after the date 9/9 in 2020, when the Brewers scored 19 runs in their game and the Braves scored 29 runs in their game. If you don't follow baseball, both of those totals are completely unheard of. Well, very, very extremely rare. And the 29 runs was a record. But the other team, the Brewers, scored 19, and normally that would be an extraordinary number of runs to score in a game, but they were outshined by 29 runs in the Braves game. And that was the record. And again, these were the two teams that Hank Aaron played for, and he only played for two teams. And, for example, when he died, the Brewers wore a number 44 patch on their sleeves. And then that year, the Braves won the World Series, and, there was all kinds of ceremony involved in the World Series for Hank Aaron, the big 44 on the outfield grass and all that, right? And also, the Atlanta Braves won the World Series, and it was the 117th World Series. It was the 117th World Series, and Hank Aaron, player number 44, the home run king, which hints at Antichrist King, the 44th president, took the thing 6 plus 6 plus 6 days earlier before he died on the first day of the 117th Congress. And the Braves' win of the 117th World Series was 9 months and 11 days, which hints at 9/11, after Hank Aaron died. So anyway, those were the two teams, and it just so happens that 117 days before he took the mark of the Antichrist on the first day of the 117th Congress was the day that these two teams scored their two, amazing amount of runs, including the record runs. In other words, the reason for that is because God was pointing to Hank Aaron taking the thing on that day. And also, the date of the two record amounts of runs, the 19 runs and the 29 runs, that was the date 9/9, and the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. Okay, so there's more to it though. Hank Aaron, player number 44, which hints at the 44th president, the Antichrist, who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist, in 4 years of his career, hit a total of 44 home runs. He tied Babe Ruth's home run record, the former home run king, on the date 4/4 in 1974, and beat Ruth's record off of pitcher number 44 in the 4th inning. Hank Aaron, player 44, died from the mark of the Antichrist exactly 444 weeks after the Batman Dark Knight Rises movie massacre. Shots, which hint at the mark of the Antichrist. And it was a massacre, which was 42 months exactly after Obama's inauguration, which was the rise of the Dark Knight to the president's office, which is why it was exactly 42 months before the Dark Knight Rises movie massacre. And in Bible prophecy, 42 months is a period mentioned 7 times regarding the period of the end times rule of the Antichrist. And by the way, the day that 42 months is 1,260 days in Bible prophecy, and his inauguration was exactly 1,260 years after the strongest earthquake ever in Israel, killed tens of thousands of people. And Barack Obama's inauguration day, the rise of the dark night, was exactly 117 months after the school shooting of school shootings that started the school shooting trend, the Columbine shooting in 1999 on April 20th, exactly 117 months before The Dark Knight Rises, which was 42 months before the Batman movie massacre, which was exactly 444 weeks before player number 44 died from the mark of the Antichrist, which is the biggest massacre of all time. Okay, Hank Aaron died 9 months and 13 days, which hints at 9 times 13 equals 117, before Joe Biden's mark of the Antichrist mandate regarding the 84 million workers. Again, the 44th president, Hank Aaron, player 44, was born on the date 8/4. That's why the mandate for 84 million workers. And again, August 4th is the 216th day in the calendar year, and 216 is 6 times 6 times 6. The Tampa Bay Rays' historic 13th game of the season, which is 117 innings, on April 13th, was 27 months and 9 days after baseball legend Hank Aaron took the mark of the Antichrist on the first day of the 117th Congress. 27 months and 9 days hints at the verse in the Bible that regards the end times period of the Antichrist, Daniel chapter 9:27. 27 months and 9 days is also 2 years, 3 months and 9 days. 2 years, 3 months and 9 days hints at 23 and 9. And again, God pairs these numbers together to confirm the signs and connections and to point to Obama. Another obvious pairing of 9 and 13, which confirms everything that I have just explained in the connection to Hank Aaron, for example, is that this 13th win for the Tampa Bay Rays involved them scoring 9 runs. By the way, there's more to the 9 months and 13 days connection from the day that Hank Aaron died, from taking the mark of the Antichrist to the mandates from Joe Biden for the mark of the Antichrist. That day, 11/4/2021, which hints at 11 times 4 equals 44, by the way, which pairs with the player number 44's death 9 months and 13 days earlier. But 11/4/2021 was exactly 99 years after the discovery of King Tut's tomb in the Valley of Kings. And in the Bible, Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, is Antichrist symbolism. 99 years. And exactly 13 years back was the day of the Obama's election on the date 11/4 in 2008, the 44th president. So 13 years and 99 years is also hinting at 9 and 13, which again, 9 times 13 equals 117. And the Tampa Bay Rays record of 13 games is 117 innings. All right, there is more amazingness to this 11/4 date in 2021, the day of the mandate for the thing by Biden for 84 million workers. This has been explained in other videos, but it was a super date. There were many signs on that date that confirm the prophetic significance of this. I'll just give you one more example quickly. This was, the Israeli Knesset, for the first time in 3.5 years, passed a budget. And 3.5 years is extremely prophetic, mentioned 7 times in Bible prophecy as being the symbolic period of the end times and the Antichrist's rule. And it's all about the restoration of Israel before the Lord returns to Israel and then rules from Israel for the 1,000 years of peace. So anyway, 3.5 years, first time budget passed because of their ongoing elections, unresolved stability in their Knesset. Okay, so this, and 3.5 years is 42 months, and it's actually expressed a couple of times as 42 months in Bible prophecy. And 11/4/2021 was exactly 42 years after the beginning start date of the Iranian hostage crisis, which is also known as the 444-day crisis. That's a nickname for it because it lasted literally 444 days. And it began on the date 11/4, which hints at 11 times 4 equals 44. And it connects with 42 years, which is the number that symbolizes the Antichrist, as does the number 44, the 44th president. And that gets us to this extremely prophetic date of 11/4/2021, the big day for the mark of the Antichrist. And again, it was the 13th anniversary of the election of Barack Obama. And anyway, also on that day too, SpaceX, which is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, because SpaceX symbolizes transhumanism, which is what this thing is, when it changes your you-know-what inside you. And so also the X in SpaceX is symbolism or hints at the mark, the Tav letter, which in Ezekiel chapter 9 in the Bible is the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist. And so that's why SpaceX. Anyway, they, on that day, 11/4/2021, the judge ruled to dismiss the case. The case was finished. The lawsuit brought by Blue Origin, the space company owned by Jeff Bezos of Amazon, they were competing for the NASA contract, and NASA awarded the contract to SpaceX, and then Blue Origin sued to try to get the contract nulled in the courts. And so anyway, that contract was for $2.9 billion. And the day the court case was dismissed on this prophetic day, and also the contract is about returning to the moon, and the return to the moon in 2024, which has been a massive theme in God's signs, communicating the return of Lord Jesus Christ in 2024. Because again, the moon symbolizes Christ, if I haven't mentioned that already in this video yet. I'll explain more later if I haven't. And so anyway, this $2.9 billion contract for the returning to the moon was exactly 29 weeks, because 2.9 hints at 29, after the day that the contract was awarded. And that was the same day as the first trumpeting, or first flag raising, of the new World War I monument, in which there were 117,000 deaths. So there's another 117 for you. Anyway, I explain more about that in other videos. The reason why I brought that up one more time here quickly is because there is another prophetic sign on that date. There is the movie White Noise, which is this movie about, that takes place, it's fiction, it takes place in the early 1980s, and it's about a bomb train. It's about a train accident and explosion and toxic gas and a mass evacuation of the town. That's what this movie White Noise is about. And it takes place right near East Palestine, where coincidentally, there was the exact same event. But not only that, there were some residents from East Palestine as extras in the movie. But not only that, it is a prophetic sign from God, this movie, because it connects, first of all, with April 13th, the date we are talking about right now. As I explained in the East Palestine video, it connects with extremely prophetic numbers. It connects with 17 months and 9 days, a pairing of 9 and 17 that identify Barack Obama, the president from 2009 until 2017, and who arrived first in Washington, D.C. as the senator in the 109th Congress, and lived on 109th Street while studying at Columbia University, and will return to the District of Columbia due to the shenanigans that brought in the president at the beginning of the 117th Congress, which was the very beginning of the mark of the Antichrist, and including Hank Aaron, who took the mark of the Antichrist on the very first day of the 117th Congress. And so that's also why 9 and 17 hint at Barack Obama. And I explain more why in other videos, 9 and 17. But also, this 17 months and 9 days is also 12,600 hours, which hints at 1,260, which is the number of days in 3.5 years, in biblical years, because biblical years, 12 months made up of 30 days each. And that is 3.5 years is 1,260 days. And this is the number of days mentioned 7 times in Bible prophecy as symbolizing the end times period of the Antichrist. And so anyway, we have that connection to April 13th from November 4th, 2021, right? And the bomb train, the movie White Noise, and the prophetic signs on April 13th, as I'm explaining in this video, are leading a trail to the date it is predicted that a dirty bomb will explode and there will be a mass evacuation on Manhattan Island. All right, but not only that, this extremely Antichrist date, which I've now gone through all of this connections to November 4th, 2021. And by the way, that was a date predicted ahead of time. You know, that, like April 13th, that was a date that it was expected to be huge ahead of time. And anyway, that's also explained in other videos. So we have all of this Antichrist connections, including to the election of Obama and the 9 months and 13 days to the death of Hank Aaron from the mark of the Antichrist. And it was the day that Biden's mandate for the mark of the Antichrist, 84 million workers, which also identifies Obama, who was born on the date 8/4. Okay, that 11/4 date, okay? That was also the date of this white noise sign, which was a dirty bomb sign that God is using, right? Well, anyway, from that date, it is exactly 6 plus 6 plus 6 months to the date it is predicted that the dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan on May 4th. In November 4th, 2021 is exactly 6 plus 6 plus 6 months, which is the number of the Antichrist, to the date it is predicted that the dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan. Oh, I forgot to explain the details as to why 11/4/2021 is the prophetic date for the movie White Noise, because that was the only day in their filming that they filmed in Cleveland. And Cleveland is a city that God uses to identify the goat Antichrist. And that's explained in the East Palestine video. The significance of Cleveland and the filming there. They filmed on the bridge. The bridge is named Hope. The bridge is symbolism for Christ, the bridge between God and man, and on and on. So this was a very prophetic date. They only filmed in Cleveland one day and on that bridge, and that's a prophetic bridge. And so anyway, that's why that's relevant. And so, in other words, again, the White Noise movie is about a bomb train, which, again, I'm saying in the other videos I explain more, which is a must-watch video, like one of the most important videos you'll ever watch. I'm explaining that the East Palestine bomb train and the Mississauga bomb train are signs from God that are pointing to the dirty bomb, toxic waste, toxic gas explosion in Manhattan, and then the evacuation. All right. The only other team to win their first 13 games was the team from St. Louis in 1884. Okay, there's only one other team, not in the modern era, but ever in history, to win more than 13 games. And that team was from St. Louis. There's a reason for that. But it was in 1884. Now, if you recall, I mentioned this number earlier. Jack Douglas Tejera was arrested 1884 days after the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas high school shooting. Jack Douglas shooting, 1884 days apart. April 13th, he was arrested. And on April 13th, the Tampa Bay Rays made their record 13 games. And the only other team that won more was in 1884. Again, 1884 hints at 18 and 84, which hints at 6 plus 666 and the date 84, which reveals Obama is the Antichrist. 1884 reveals him as the Antichrist. 1884 also adds up to 21. If you add these numbers together, you get 21. And on April 13th, the arrest of the 21-year-old is 21 days before the date 5/4. the predicted date of the dirty bomb and mass evacuation in Manhattan Island, for which the signs on April 13th are for the purpose of revealing and pointing out. The 2023 Tampa Bay Rays are the third team in history to trail in 6 or less innings out of their first 117 innings. The other two teams to do this did so in 1884, including this team, the St. Louis Maroons. The Great American Eclipse peaked near St. Louis at 1:17 p.m., which hinted at 117 and the 117th Congress, during which the president that became president due to the shenanigans in 2020, which will lead to his replacement, the Antichrist. And the eclipse in St. Louis peaked near St. Louis and at 1:17 p.m. And this is hinted at with this St. Louis team and this 117 innings prophetic sign. The 2023 Tampa Bay Rays have the third highest run differential after their first 13 games. And two teams to have a higher run, and the two teams to have a higher run differential accomplished this in 1884. That's a typo. So we have another confirmation of 1884. Okay. So the Tampa Bay Rays run differential means, they scored more runs than their opponents total. They have the third highest run differential after their first 13 games. The two other teams that have a higher run differential are the two teams that did it in 1884. In the first 13 games of the Rays, they have a 71 run difference. 13 plus 71 equals 84. I'll repeat that. In the first 13 games of the Rays, they have a run difference of 71 runs, and 13 plus 71 equals 84, which again hints at the president that was born on the date 8/4, the 216th day of the year. The Rays have the third most home runs after 13 games. Again, 3 divided by 13 equals 0.230, which reveals the identity of the Antichrist, the basketball president that wore jersey 23. That's why the Rays, which is again Antichrist symbolism, lightning, everything, were the third most home runs after 13 games, 3 divided by 13. And again, as I explained earlier, the Rays are one of 3 teams in the modern era to win their first 13 games of the season, which is a second witness of 3 and 13 here. Another witness to that, a third witness, is the final score of 3-9, which hints at 39, and 39 is 3 times 13. The Rays have hit 32 home runs in 13 games. Behind the St. Louis Cardinals at 33, and the team from King County, Washington State, the Seattle Mariners, at 33. The Great American Eclipse that passed over St. Louis, the only major city for which the path of totality passed over, well, in fact, it also passed over Nashville, Tennessee, first entered the country from the Pacific Ocean near where the Mariners play, in the 33rd state. The Seattle Mariners baseball market serves the 33rd state. In other words, if you live in Oregon, you're likely a Mariners fan. That's the closest baseball team. The eclipse exited the U.S. on the 33rd parallel line. The 2023 Rays won their first 9 games by 4 or more runs. And this feat is second to the 1884 St. Louis Maroons at 13 games that won by 4 or more runs. This gives us a pairing of 9 and 13. Again, so it was 9 games The first 9 games, they won by 4 or more runs. The other team to have done it, that won by 4 or more runs, did it in 1884. But 4 or more runs hints at 44, by the way, the 44th president. But this 9-game streak of winning by 4 or more runs in 13 games is another pairing of 9 and 13 also. But also God pairs 9 and 44, and this is a clear pairing of 9 and 44 also. But the even bigger point here is, again, that God used the Tampa Bay Rays in Florida and the Florida signs, among other things, to point to the once in 1,000 year flooding event in Broward County and the state of emergency in Broward County. And the Florida legislature that same day passing the new abortion restriction law for 6 weeks, because this day was 1884 days after the mass shooting at the Broward County High School. And again, mass shootings have been judgment warning from God for abortions. And that began with the peak of the baby boomers for which abortions were legalized, their kids in high school with the Columbine shooting, and then later progressed to university shootings as the baby boomer generation's kids were in high school. For condoning abortions, that's the judgment warning. So anyway, that's why all of this is another example, in other words, this winning by 4 or more runs in 9 games and 13 games, which pairs together to confirm this connection, as has been explained. That's how it works. And therefore, we have another pointing to 1884, which confirms the 1884 days. The Rays' 8th and 9th wins were both 11 runs to 0. That's astounding. Okay, so the Rays are the 4th team to ever have back-to-back shutouts of 11 or more runs. But they did this in their 9th game. And so this is a pairing of 9 and 11. Okay, there's only 4 teams that have had shutouts back-to-back with 11 or more runs. And the Rays did that with their 9th game of the season, giving us a 9 and 11. The Tampa Bay Rays logo is a sunburst. The only thing on the front of their jersey, at least in their 13th game, which is the one I watched in the highlights, is a sunburst logo. It looks like an explosion. The club is marketing this new logo. It's new, and so they're marketing it heavily, as it is on their pitching mound and on the outfield fence. It's just this explosion. No letter, no nothing, just an explosion. It's a sunburst. But this is all because it's designed by God. And this is because this prophetic game on 4/13 is exactly 40 weeks prior to the predicted burst on the surface of the sun on February 22nd, 2024, which will cause a catastrophic solar flare and coronal mass ejection, which will cause massive power outages and the eruption of Yellowstone volcano. So that's why it's astounding. In other words, this was known ahead of time. It was known ahead of time that April 13th was or would be exactly 40 weeks before February 22nd, 2024, the predicted date of the catastrophic solar flare. 40 weeks is very prophetic because when the disciples asked Jesus for the signs to look for of his return, Jesus replied with the metaphor of birth pains. According to the medical profession, the average human gestation period is 40 weeks, hence why 40 weeks connections are extremely prophetic. This is one reason among many, many dozens and dozens of reasons why it was assumed that April 13th would be the date of the dirty bomb explosion, because it in itself would be part of the trail of signs that would be leading to the explosion on the surface of the sun. Instead, like I explained earlier, we had a different explosion sign, but also this Tampa Bay Rays sign, this game against Boston, as I've been explaining, is also a prophetic explosion sign. because of the sunburst logo. And it's astounding because we are talking about its connection to the burst on the surface of the sun that's predicted. On July 20th, 2022, Joe Biden delivered a speech in Somerset, Massachusetts, with a dramatic view of the Taunton River and the bridge across the river in the backdrop. This was near Dighton, Massachusetts, where Jack Teixeira was arrested. Exactly 4 times 4 hours after Biden's speech began in Somerset at 7 a.m. the following morning, a subway train in Boston burst into flames as it crossed the bridge from Somerville, Massachusetts. There was an evacuation of the train. I should say there was an evacuation of the train, and the passengers walked off of the bridge. It was on a bridge when this happened. They had to walk off of the bridge over the Mystic River. In a panic, one woman jumped into the Mystic River. Okay? And again, this was 4 times 4 hours after the dramatic bridge in the backdrop of Biden's speech in Somerset and Somerville, right? Furthermore, these signs occurred at the peak of summer during a heat wave, which was, as I'm about to explain, the point of Biden's speech. Somerset, Somerville, peak of summer. The train that burst into flames and the evacuation from the bridge hints at the evacuation across the bridges of the East River from Manhattan Island, predicted to be on May 4th. Which will be exactly 41 weeks after the evacuation of the bridge and explosion in Boston. The number 41 is the 13th prime number, which is why a main part of this story was how the MTA, the Metro Transit Authority, restored train service to this subway line at 10:30 a.m. 10:30 hints at 13. Like Dighton, Somerset was a historic ferry crossing location. And this also hints at the ferrying of people from Manhattan Island across the Hudson River in the predicted evacuation from the dirty bomb on May 4th. All right, this is huge, and more will be explained later as this story continues to build. But here we have a pairing of 9 and 13 again, because the date, May 4th, hints at 9. 5 plus 4 equals 9. It also hints at 54, a multiple of 9. And so we have this 41 weeks connection to this date that symbolizes or is hinted at with the number 9. Also, this is Massachusetts, and where this is leading to is the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, which is famous for having refused their pay for not being paid the $13 that they were promised like other Union soldiers. The 54th Massachusetts Regiment was the first black regiment in the Civil War. And so that, in other words, it's all about this number 13, and 54 is a number, it hints at the number 9. But we have this in this connection right here, because this is Massachusetts, Biden, and this train, and it is exactly 41 weeks, which is the 13th prime number. And again, the train resumed at 10:30, which also hinted at 13, which confirms the 41 weeks connection to the date that is hinted at with the number 9, which also confirms the connection because it's a pairing of 9 and 13. And this is all pointing to the 54th Massachusetts Regiment and the number of $13, and 54 hints at the number 9, which is why the dirty bomb will explode on the date 5/4, because it hints at the number 54. Again, why these Massachusetts signs are a part of this this big picture here that I'm explaining. Biden's speech in Somerset was about a supposed climate emergency, which hinted at the emergency of the explosion on the sun and the dirty bomb. delivered at the peak of summer heat, he mentioned that it had been 117 degrees somewhere. I forget somewhere where it was, but he mentioned that. He probably didn't even mention the location, actually, come to think of it. So, but the point is that he mentioned this number 117. And he, coyly did this at the peak of the summer heat wave because it's, propaganda for the supposed climate emergency, right? But anyway, he also mentioned that he had skin cancer and inferred that it was the result of pollution. However, people get skin cancer due to sun exposure, not pollution, typically. He proposed a $2.3 billion package for climate energy initiatives. There will be a lack of energy when the power grid goes down after the upcoming burst from the sun. $2.3 billion hints at 23. And right as he said the words, quote, "And that's why today I'm making the largest investment," unquote, the news ticker on the screen showed that the Dow ticked a gain of an exact 23.00 at that very moment. His speech began 4 times 4 hours before the Orange Line train burst into flames. This was an amazing pairing of 23 and 44 that confirms the signs and connections. Again, he mentioned 2.3 billion, which hints at 23, right as the ticker ticked 23.00, 4.4 hours before the train on the bridge on the Orange Line burst into flames. The Orange Line that burst into flames hints at the upcoming burst on the surface of the orange sun. As mentioned, the solar flare on the sun is predicted to be exactly 40 weeks after the sunburst Tampa Bay Rays prophetic sign, which was a game against Boston. The final score was 3-9, which also hints at 93. And the sun is 93 million miles away from Earth. The sunburst baseball sign against the team from Boston and the arrest of the document leaker near Boston was exactly 38 weeks after the Orange Line burst into flames in Boston. And the Orange Line burst into flames in Boston exactly 83 weeks, the inverse of 38 weeks. 83 is the inverse of 38. Exactly 83 weeks before the predicted burst of fire on the orange sun. 38 weeks and 83 weeks hints at 3 plus 8 equals 11. From the Bible, the number 11 is the symbolic number of the execution of God's judgment. It occurs in the context of the execution of God's judgment. 3 times 8 equals 24, and the burst on the sun will be in 2024. Also, 38 and 83 hint at 3 8s, 888, which is the numeric value of the name Jesus in Greek. Greek letters are also numbers, just as Roman letters are also numbers, Roman numerals. Also, 83 is the 23rd prime number, and the predicted burst on the sun will be exactly 83 weeks after Biden announced a $2.3 billion energy package as the Dow ticked a gain of 23.00. When the burst of the sun happens, there will be an energy emergency. And Biden's energy package was for a supposed climate emergency. Given that the dirty bomb in Manhattan will be 3 weeks exactly, which is 3 sets of 7 days, after the sunburst baseball sign on April 13th, that means the dirty bomb explosion will be exactly 37 weeks before the predicted burst of the sun and 37 hints at 3 sets of 7. The record season for the Boston Bruins ended on April 13th with a game against Montreal. The Lord used the exodus of Montreal Island to Mississauga and the bomb train and evacuation of Mississauga as signs that point to the dirty bomb and evacuation of Manhattan Island. As explained in the video, Obama mentioned in his prophetic state dinner speech the name Mississauga 3 times. Mississauga is the 7th most populous city in Canada. This was exactly 370 weeks before April 13th. 370 weeks hints at 3 sets of 7, as does saying the name Mississauga 3 times. As explained in the video, this is all about the oppressive minority language laws in Quebec that were codified in Bill 101, which is symbolism for the oppressive minority laws of the Hebrews in Egypt and the oppressive minority laws that will come from the Antichrist. The 11th triangular number is 66, and the Antichrist's number, 666, is described in the 66th book in the Bible. The Boston Bruins and Montreal Canadiens are 2 of the original 6 teams of the NHL, and they ended their season with a game against each other. This hints at 6 and 6, making 66, and hints at the end times. The end of the season, last game of the season, hints at the end times, described in the 66th book of the Bible, the book of Revelation. All right, so here are the prophetic details of this other Boston sports team game. Again, we had already on this April 13th date this prophetic game involving the Boston baseball team against the Tampa Bay Rays. And we are now talking about the hockey game involving the Boston Bruins and the Montreal Canadiens. It's very, very significant. The last game of the season. So I'm just going to go through the details of the actual game, which will confirm the prophetic significance of this game. The first goal of the game was the first ever NHL goal for this player, and it was his first ever shift in the NHL. He scored on the Boston Bruins goalie, player number 1. This player for Montreal wears jersey number 73. 73 hints at 3 sets of 7, and 73 is the 21st prime number, and 21 is 3 sets of 7. This goal by player 73 against Boston on this same day that the 21-year-old was arrested near Boston. This game was on Montreal Island. This is stunning confirmation for adding 3 sets of 7 days to April 13th to get the date that it is predicted a dirty bomb will explode and there will be an evacuation on Manhattan Island. And again, as I briefly touched on earlier, but thoroughly explained in the East Palestine video, as I said, a must-watch video, God used the exodus from Montreal Island as symbolism and through pointing to his big picture of signs to the exodus and evacuation from Manhattan Island. And that's why on this April 13th date, Boston was playing Montreal on Montreal Island. And that's why right away, the first sign of the game, this first goal ever for this player in his first shift ever in the NHL, was by player 73, which confirms 3 sets of 7, adding 3 sets of 7 days to the day of the arrest of the 21-year-old, 3 sets of 7, on April 13th, the same day as the 3 sets of 7 symbolic goal by player 73. It's amazing. The first goal by the Boston Bruins was by player number 11. It made the score 1-1, which also hinted at the number 11. This was on Montreal Island, where people fled in the Exodus due to Bill 101, which hints at the number 11. And in other words, this first goal by player number 11 to make the score 1-1, which hints at 11, on Montreal Island, hinted at Bill 101, the oppressive law regarding minority language rights, which hints at the oppressive laws in Egypt and the exodus from Egypt, and also hints at the upcoming oppressive laws, minority laws, on those that don't take the mark of the Antichrist. The second goal for the Boston Bruins was by player 74. 74 also hints at 7 + 4 = 11, which also hints at Bill 101. This second goal is a second witness confirmation that the first Boston goal hints at Bill 101. The second goal for Montreal was by Nick Suzuki, which made the score 2-2, which hints at the number 22, which, as was explained earlier, is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, which will be enforced by oppressive minority laws. This goal was scored on Montreal Island, and people fled Montreal Island due to Bill 101, which is symbolic of the oppressive minority laws from the Antichrist. The reason why this player's name is Nick is because this hints at the Nick-Olaetan doctrine and works that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war on with the sword of his mouth on those that have that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine, which is the vast majority of the church. And in fact, the reason for the Antichrist and the mark of the Antichrist is judgment for the church. It is for the church. It's for cleansing God's church. It is the purpose. The purpose of God's creation is the church, and therefore, obviously, also the Antichrist's purpose is the church as well. And this is what Nick hints at. God is very, very displeased with the American church, including and especially God is pointing to the evangelical church that has the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day, which is explained in the must-watch 23 Church Signs Prophecy video, but is sovereign grace and free grace, which come in the packages of Calvinism and dispensationalism, and both lead to the heretical Gnostic doctrine of once saved, always saved, and also the myth of imputed righteousness as evangelicals understand it. And our righteousness is as filthy rags, the one verse that Luther took out of context and twisted to support his entire Gnostic theology. And also, all Christians will be raptured, etc. The third goal for Montreal made the score 2-3, which hints at 23, the Antichrist's jersey number. This goal was scored when Montreal player 32, which also hints at 23, beat the Boston goalie to the puck and then passed it to Montreal player 55, who scored on an open net. Player 32 hints at 23, and also the 32nd prime number, which is 131, which hints at G131, the 131st word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance, which is the word for blood disease, which is what people get after having taken the mark of the Antichrist. Player 55 hints at the fifth trumpet, judgment, and also Revelation 5:5, the beginning of the judgments, the unsealing of the scroll by the Lion of Judah, and also Daniel 5:5, which is the verse in chapter 5 regarding the handwriting on the wall, which is in English an idiom that means quite likely that bad things are about to happen. And so, but also in context of judgment in that story in that chapter 5. Player 52, and it also hints at St. Louis and the I-55 that runs through an area of the country nicknamed Little Egypt, where the Great American Eclipse passed over and peaked over. But that will be explained also in other videos. So player 32 also hints at 4 times 8 and the 48th president and Antichrist. Beating the goalie, player 32, he beat the goalie again. He beat the goalie. It was a race to the puck. The goalie came out of his net. Player 32 beat him to the puck and then passed it to his teammate 55, who scored on an empty net. Beating the goalie, the defender, and scoring on an open net is symbolic of the removal of the wall of security, God's divine protection over the nation. And again, Boston symbolizes America, the spiritual founding of America, the Boston Bay, Massachusetts Bay Colony. And this goalie was the Boston goalie that was removed, or was scored on an open net after he was beaten, and which was symbolism for the walls of security of America being removed. Boston Bruins player 13 then made the score 4-4, which hints at the 44th president Antichrist. The goal that made it 4-4 was scored in Montreal, and Montreal is French for Mount Royal, which hints at the Temple Mount, which is where the Antichrist will be defeated at the Lord's second coming, as described in Bible prophecy. But also, this is why there are a number of prophetic signs involving Obama in Montreal. But again, it also identifies him as the Antichrist that will enforce the minority oppressive laws, which were symbolically codified in Bill 101, which led to the exodus from Montreal. The last goal of the game came at exactly 9.00 minutes remaining in the game. And it made the final score, 5-4, which hints at 5 and 4 equals 9. 9 is the most important number in God's big picture of signs, as was mentioned, as it symbolizes God's judgment. This is astounding. So the last goal of the game came at 9.00 minutes. And it made the score a final score of 5-4, and 5 plus 4 equals 9. The goal was scored by Boston player 88, and the assist came from player 81. 81 hints at 9 times 9, and also 9 divided by 11 equals 0.818181. In other words, 81 is a number that symbolizes 9/11 and judgment. On 9/11, there were the heroes of the 88th floor. The events of 9/11 pointed to George Washington, as explained in other videos, and according to Wikipedia, there are 88 places in America named Washington. And the Tribute in Light art installation that commemorated the Twin Towers was made up of 88 searchlights. And so this goal by player 88, that was assisted by player 81, is 9/11 symbolism. The first 2 goals of the game for Boston hinted at the number 11 and Bill 101. The last goal of the game hinted at the number 9, as it was scored exactly 9 minutes remaining, and made the score 5-4, which hints at 9. And the assist was by player 81, which is 9 times 9. Thus, this last goal made this a pairing of 9 and 11 that hints at 9/11. The last goal was also the 61st goal for this player 88, the 61st goal of the season. 88 is 2 times 44, which hints at the second presidency for the 44th president, who was born in 1961. And 61 is the 18th prime number, which hints at 6 plus 6 plus 6, the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. Last but not least, this first goal of this game was scored by player 73. His first goal ever in his first shift ever hinted at 3 sets of 7, and 73 is the 21st prime number. This goal was scored against Boston, and this was the same day that the 21-year-old document leaker was arrested near Boston, and 21 is 3 sets of 7. The last goal of this prophetic game on Montreal Island made the score 5-4, which is absolutely stunning beyond words confirmation for adding 21 days to the date of this game to reach the date 5-4 and the predicted dirty bomb and evacuation from Manhattan Island. Again, on April 13th, the first goal of this game involving Boston on Montreal Island was by player number 73, which gives us 3 sets of 7. It was on the same day as the 21-year-old, which is 3 sets of 7, and his arrest near Boston. And this is 21 days before the date 5-4. And the last goal of the game made the score 5-4. In other words, the score of this extremely prophetic game hinted at 5-4 and was confirmation of the evacuation from Manhattan Island, which is hinted at with the exodus from Montreal Island. Something to add here is that these signs on April 13th, including the once in 1,000 years rain event in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, the record rain in 24 hours, it's arguable that 24 hours hints at 42. 42 in the Bible appears in context of slaughter. There were, for example, 42 cities for people taking refuge from if they had committed manslaughter. Also, 42 descendants of King Ahab were slaughtered by King Jehu and his men at the pit. It was 42 boys that were slaughtered by the bear in 2 Kings. And the 42 months in context of the Antichrist is also a hint at slaughter. And so this is why this occurred. This is why this 24-hour period, this record 24 hours, because the thing is that, as I explained earlier, the Fort Lauderdale flooding is pointing to 1884 days earlier, and the high school shooting, the deadliest high school shooting in U.S. history in Broward County at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas School, which is why Jack Douglas Tejera, right, if you recall. Anyway, these two dates connect, and so the reason is because, well, the school shooting was a slaughter, but there's more to it. God has demonstrated overwhelmingly, and it's explained in other videos, but mass school shootings have been judgment for abortions, and particularly in relation to the baby boomer generation's kids while they were in school. Because Columbine, for example, occurred at the beginning of the peak of baby boomers' kids in high school, and that's also a few years later when they progressed to university shootings. It's judgment on the parents for condoning other parents for abortions, not necessarily because they did it themselves, but the society at large has condoned abortions. And so that's what the school shootings have been. And they've been slaughters. And anyway, on this day, the Florida House passed an abortion law at 6 weeks, which is 42 days. And again, that's hinted at with the 24-hour period, and it connects to the slaughter of the school shooting. But also, again, this connects 21 days later, the signs on April 13th to May 4th, 5-4. And that will be 42 days after the announcement of Tom Brady that he had purchased the Las Vegas Aces basketball team. Tom Brady is 199th selected in his draft. And that day, which was March 23rd, was exactly 1,999 days after the deadliest shooting ever in U.S. history, which was the Las Vegas shooting. The sniper, the shooter, was an ace. That's what ace means in military propaganda. Meaningfully measurable statistic in sniping deaths. And he shot from the Mandalay Bay Hotel, and that's the same hotel in which the Las Vegas Aces basketball team plays in. This will be explained more in other videos, but I thought I would add that since this 42 came up, because it all ties together. God's big picture of signs is an interconnected web, and when you try to explain it, one part of the web, you end up pulling the entire web. It's not two-dimensional, it's multi-dimensional, and it's extremely difficult to explain because of that. And so anyway, that we'll have to cut it off there, and I'll be explaining the Tom Brady Aces prophetic sign and the Las Vegas school shooting in another video. But it ties to all of this because this is astounding. 42 days, 6 weeks, that's the passing of this abortion law in Florida, 6-week abortion ban. All right, another thing that I wrote, 21 years old for the document leaker that was part of the 102nd Wing could hint at 21 and 12 and 202, which is the area code of Manhattan. If you follow that, okay. So if you look at it here, 21, and then if you follow that with a 12, you've got 21 and 12. The ones merge together, and you get 212. I don't think that's too far of a stretch. I'm not going to say that's like 100% definite from God. But anyway, it's very interesting. All right. Now, God uses stock market signs and also including the S&P 500 stock market index, because the 500th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance is the word Antichrist. So this is why the S&P 500 stock index is important. And we are looking for a confirmation for the date 5-4. In these signs that occurred on April 13th, we are looking possibly for a confirmation given, the 21 days connection, which we've already explained a lot. We're looking for a confirmation for the date 5-4. Well, on this day, April 13th, the S&P 500 gained 54 points. It's astounding. And also, 54 is a multiple of 9, and 5 plus 4 equals 9. 9 is the number for God's judgment, which is why the dirty bomb will explode on this date, one reason. But the gain was precisely 54.27. And 27 is 9 plus 9 plus 9. God uses the number 27 as an emphasis of the number 9. And on this day, April 13th, we had 3 signs in the 27th state. We had the Tampa Bay baseball game, we had the flooding in Fort Lauderdale, and we had the 6 weeks abortion law. And arguably there's another sign, but it's probably part of the weather sign, but there was the tornadoes in Dania Beach as well. But there's 3 signs in the 27th state, and that's 27 because it's 9 plus 9 plus 9. Also, the 6 weeks slaughter equals 42 days, which would also confirm the 1884 days after the Parkland High School slaughter. I just explained that. The Rays played their game in Florida, and it confirmed the 1884. I explained that earlier, how the team in 1884 was pointed to through the 2023 Rays, which confirmed the 1884 days between the Parkland High School shooting in Broward County and the flooding state of emergency in Broward County. Furthermore, the school shootings have been judgment warnings on parents that condone abortions. I just explained all of that. Also, on April 13th, North Korea test-fired its first solid-fuel ICBM missile for the first time. Okay, so it was a first. God uses firsts in his prophetic signs as confirmation for the prophetic significance of the event. This was the first ever test fired of a solid fuel ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missile, for North Korea. North Korea called it, quote unquote, a miraculous success. This caused confusion in Japan and an evacuation order for 30 minutes. This was exactly 63 months after the 30-minute panic and confusion in Hawaii after the false missile alert on January 13th, 2018. 63 is a multiple of 9, and 6 plus 3 equals 9. The historic molasses affair involving 63 casks of molasses was in Dayton on this same date, April 13th, pointed to Dayton, the arrest of the document leaker. And the Boston Bruins broke the record for all-time wins in a season with 63 wins, which will be explained more in another video, or maybe later in this video. And so this is amazing because this confirms the 63 months connection as being prophetic. It's a multiple of 9. It's a 9 symbolism sign. We've got exactly 63 months between the false missile alert in Hawaii, okay, and this first test of the ICBM. Now, when this panic was going on in Hawaii for 30 minutes, they didn't know what was going on for 30 whole minutes until it was finally revealed that it was a false alarm. You can imagine what was going on. But anyway, they would have been thinking that there's a missile on its way from North Korea. That's exactly what they would have been thinking. Okay, and so that's astounding. And also 3 days after the false missile alert in Hawaii, Japan coincidentally, designed by God in other words, also had a false missile alert. They had a false missile alert. Japan had a false missile alert just 3 days after Hawaii had a false missile alert. Both of these, supposed accidents. Well, they were accidents, but the timing of it was designed by God. Japan, in God's prophetic signs, is symbolism for nuclear weapons. And these signs on April 13th, as I am explaining, point to the dirty bomb 21 days later, which will be using nuclear material. Okay, so this is nuclear bomb symbolism. The signs on April 13th is 3 sets of 7 days to 5/4, and it is 37 days to the date it is predicted that Israel will nuke Damascus, Syria. 37 hints at 3 sets of 7. So this nuclear weapons sign involving North Korea here, it's 3 sets of 7 days to the dirty bomb in Manhattan predicted, but it is also 37 days, which is also 3 sets of 7 to the date it is predicted that Israel will nuke Damascus, the first use of a nuclear bomb since Japan. Yeah, and also what's not said here? Oh, I forgot. Oh, I did mention it. Yeah, this caused confusion. There was an evacuation in Japan on this sign, in the sign here. Japan symbolizes nuclear weapons. 37 days later will be the day of the first use of a nuclear weapon since one was dropped on Japan. And 37 days before Israel will nuke Damascus, we had a Japan prophetic sign, an evacuation because of a nuclear weapon or a missile that symbolizes nuclear weapons. It's astounding. All right, here's something that I wrote in this email thread after the discovery, the conviction that May 4th would be the date of the predicted dirty bomb in Manhattan and mass evacuation. I wrote, in the Bible, Damascus represents the world. I could give a Bible study on this, but that's not the point of this video. It is also the oldest continually inhabited city in the world, which, by the way, is designed by God in order to demonstrate the fulfillment of prophecy. Because Isaiah chapter 17 says that Damascus will be destroyed overnight. It will become a heap of ruins, as it says, overnight. And the way that would happen would be with a nuclear bomb. It is predicted that Israel will nuke Damascus, and it is predicted that will be on May 20th. But anyway, this is 2023. But this is why it is the oldest continually inhabited city in the world, in order to demonstrate that this has never happened in history. It has never at any point in its history been an uninhabited heap of ruins. And so when it does become an uninhabited heap of ruins, it will fulfill the prophecy in Isaiah chapter 17, which will be another demonstration of the proof of the God of the Bible, by the God of the Bible. So anyway, moving on here, according to E.W. Bullinger, which is an author that wrote a long time ago a lot about the prophetic, wrote a lot about the prophetic significance of numbers in the Bible, and the Bible is filled with symbolic, meaningful numbers for those to look into it, such as myself and people that are interested in his prophetic signs, because he uses numbers in his prophetic signs to confirm his signs and to give information. And so anyway, the number 4 and 44 and 44, which emphasize the number 4, is the symbol of, or symbolizes, man's works, and is the city number. And so this is why Damascus is symbolized by 4 or 44 or 444. Okay, and the Hebrew gematria, because the letters in the Hebrew alphabet are also numerals, like Roman letters are also numerals. The equivalent of the name Damascus, Syria, is 999. And that is an emphasis of God's judgment. Again, the number 9 is the most important number that symbolizes God's judgment. And so the destruction of Damascus at what could arguably be called the beginning of the chaos and tribulation, which will begin this May, when, among other things, there will be a dirty bomb in Manhattan and Israel will nuke Damascus. This will symbolize the beginning of judgment on the world, God's wrath. That's why Damascus, Syria, its gematria value is 999. And also the name Syria means high place or elevated, which is also symbolism for the Antichrist. In the Bible, the high place is a euphemism for the false religious worship of the Jews would conduct on the tops of mountains. So that's why this day of the predicted dirty bomb on May 4th is exactly 4 times 4 days before it is predicted that Israel will nuke Damascus. So in other words, these two nuclear events, if you will, the dirty bomb using nuclear waste material, will be 4 times 4 days exactly apart. And this not only hints at the 44th president Antichrist that will rise to power partly as a result of the events that will happen in May, these two events, but also, like I am saying, 44 is symbolism for Damascus. And so that's why this is astounding, this 4 times 4 connection between these two nuclear events, if you will. All right, here is something that I wrote that I had mentioned already just briefly. Coincidentally, Japan issued a false missile alert just 3 days after Hawaii's false missile alert in 2018. This connects with exactly 63 months from April 13th, that Hawaii missile false alert, and the confusion and evacuation alert in Japan, which is 3 sets of 7 days to May 4th. So in other words, from the false missile alert in Hawaii, which was followed just 3 days later by the false missile alert in Japan, it is exactly 63 months to April 13th. And again, there was an evacuation and confusion in Japan on this day because of the first ever test of the ICBM by North Korea. And so anyway, and I explained this already, the 63 months is hinting at the number 9 in judgment. And so anyway, this day, April 13th, is 3 sets of 7 days to May 4th, but it is also 37 days to May 20th, which is the date it is predicted that Israel will nuke Damascus. And so we have the 3 sets of 7 days and the 37 days. I think I also explained that earlier, and if I did, I apologize for repeating it. Japan was where the first nuclear bomb was used. That's the symbolism of Japan in this. And April 20th is predicted to be the next use of a nuclear bomb on another country. Here is a map of the trails, including the trail from Dayton. This is a map of the trails of the pilgrims at the time. And here, and you can see the trail through that goes from Plymouth to the home of Massasoit through Dighton. I think the evacuation from the bridge and railway track is a parallel. So what I'm saying is that this evacuation on the bridge in Boston with the subway train is a parallel to a track. It's a parallel with a trail, and it's, in other words, these signs are parallel, tied to each other symbolically. There's a connection, in other words. The evacuation from Montreal Island to Mississauga was also along a symbolic trail, Highway 401, from Montreal to Toronto. They even nicknamed the migration something like the Great Flight down the 401. So the 401 is the equivalent of an interstate highway in Canada, and it's a very well-known highway. These are the two biggest cities in Canada, and they are connected with this 401 highway. And this was the path of the exodus from Montreal Island to Toronto and Mississauga, which I explain the prophetic significance of this and how it parallels the exodus of the Hebrews from Egypt in the absolute must-watch East Palestine video. But as I'm about to explain, the reason is, as explained in the video, the exodus from Montreal Island is a parallel with the exodus from Egypt in the Bible, and the Hebrews were persecuted for 400 years. It is 400 years from Plymouth Rock to today. I mean, that was 2020 was the 400th anniversary, which came and went without any fanfare in the media, because the media is leftist and it hates America. And so that's why you didn't even know it, probably. But so 400 years from Plymouth Rock, but this is prophetically significant, as I am explaining. Dighton is known for its historic rock. So 400 years from the Plymouth Rock, we have this Dighton sign, and Dighton is known for its historic rock, which I explained earlier. And this rock is now in the, for example, Dighton Rock State Park in a museum. It's amazing that the exodus from Montreal was down the 401. Now, the reason why I wrote with the question mark there is because the people that I'm writing to know what I'm talking about, because in Egypt, the Pharaoh, which is a type for the Antichrist, persecuted the Jews for 400 years. The Hebrews were afflicted for 400 years in the Bible timeline. And that's why the 401, it's absolutely astounding. The migration, which I'm saying is a parallel with the Bible, was down the Highway 401. And the Hebrews left Egypt after 400 years of affliction. And again, they left because of the oppressive minority laws, just like the people in Montreal Island fled because of the oppressive minority laws, the language laws, which is what God has used as symbolism, hinting at the upcoming oppressive minority laws from the Antichrist, the enforcement of taking the mark of the Antichrist, the thing, as you should know what I'm talking about when I say the thing that people were forced to take if they wanted to keep their job or something to that effect, which is the mark of the Antichrist. And the purpose of the prediction being made in this video is to prove this. That is the purpose of this prediction that is from God. End of debate. No more debate or discussion. End of controversy. It's over. It is the mark of the Antichrist, and that is the purpose of the prediction being made in this video. Make no mistake. Okay. As expected, the winning streak came to an end for Tampa Bay at 13 games on April 14th, the next day. They were beaten in Toronto by the Toronto Blue Jays 3-6, which hints at 36, and therefore 666. I think I explained that, but 36 is 6 times 6, which is also 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And the 36th triangular number is 666 because in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666. And 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. And therefore, this is symbolism for the Antichrist, this game, okay? as does the number 13 symbolize the Antichrist. The Antichrist will rise to power after a plane crash caused by a bird strike. And that's why the blue jays, which are a type of bird, God has used the blue jays, and for that matter, the orioles, but especially the blue jays, in other prophetic signs for this purpose, which is explained in other videos. In other words, this is a second or a multiple confirmation of the fact that the blue jays symbolize the bird strike, okay? And so that's why the connection with the Antichrist symbolism here with the Toronto Blue Jays. This game, in which the Blue Jays beat the Tampa Bay symbolizes lightning, and Kamala Harris's plane will crash due to turbulence and lightning and then be hit by a bird. And that's how the Antichrist will come to power through her replacement. And this will all be symbolism for when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. And as was explained, I think, in this video already, Barack Obama, the name in Hebrew means lightning from heaven. But anyway, this game on April 14th is 77 days before it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash due to a bird strike on June 30th, 2023. This 77 games is prophetically significant because the Blue Jays are birds and the team was founded in 1977. And I know this because I grew up in Toronto as a Blue Jays fan. And this is an example of how this ministry, this video, this analysis of God's prophetic signs was designed, what my life was designed for this, because who else would know that? The fact that the Blue Jays became a team in 1977, which confirms the 77 days connection. This game was also 3 sets of 7 days after the 70-year-old factory explosion of the chocolate factory. Okay, so I wrote that badly there. The factory is 70 years old, this company, and this exploded, okay? And it was located on 77 2nd Avenue, all right? And this game that is 77 days before Kamala Harris's plane crash connects with 3 sets of 7 days to this 70-year-old factory on the 77 address, which is a 3 sets of 7. 70 years and 77 is a 3 sets of 7, and it's 3 sets of 7 days before this 77 days connection. And the factory is near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, okay? The second state. The location was on 2nd Avenue. And the explosion sign was 44 years exactly after the 3 Mile Island accident in Pennsylvania near Harrisburg. Harrisburg hints at Kamala Harris, which is why the explosion was near Harrisburg, and also the 3 Mile Island accident in 1979 was also near Harrisburg. Okay, I should say the game was 3 sets of 7 days after the collapse of the chocolate factory. I think I already said that. All right. In addition to the final score of 5-4 in the Boston Bruins game on Montreal Island on April 13th, the S&P 500, I don't know if I already mentioned this, I might have, but the S&P 500 God uses because, he uses stock market signs, but one of the 3 main indexes is the S&P 500, and the 500th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance is the word Antichrist, which is another reason why the S&P 500 is prophetically significant. And on this April 13th day, the S&P 500 gained 54.27 points. 54 exclamation marks is how exciting that is. 54 is a multiple of 9, and 5 plus 4 equals 9. And also the 0.27 hints at 9 plus 9 plus 9, an emphasis of the number 9, which is the most important number in God's signs, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment. And so the S&P gained 54 points on the day that the score in the Boston game was 5-4. And as I write here, the final score in the Boston game of 5-4 and the S&P gain of 54 are astounding. However, there is more to God's purpose for this 54 number. It was the hockey team, because this is confirming the date 5-4, right? Because I don't even think I wrote it right here, but this is confirmation, but I said it earlier, I'm sure. So the signs on April 13th were all about, for the purpose of adding 21 days, 3 sets of 7, the 21-year-old document leaker that was arrested in Massachusetts. If we add 21 days, 5-4. And on April 13th, we had the final score of the extremely prophetic hockey game of 5-4, and the S&P 500 gained 54 points. But it was a significant gain. 54-point gain in one day is a significant amount. It's not a typical or an average amount either, but that's not even the point. The point is that it was 54 in conjunction with these signs that are hinting at 54 and pointing to the date 5-4. Okay, but there's more, as I'm saying. There's more to God's purpose for this 54 number than simply pointing to the date 5-4. It was the hockey team from Massachusetts that won the game 5-4 on the same day that the document leaker was arrested in Massachusetts. This is because God is pointing to the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment. 54,000 exclamation marks. More will be explained in the April 15th email. So I need to explain this some more, and I'm going to pause right here from explaining it right now. But this is the huge thing. This is the huge thing. This is why it all comes down to this 5-4 date. It's all pointing to the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment, which is again why these Massachusetts signs on this day. So let's get on. We're getting closer to the climax now. All right, the climax to God's story that He's telling here, and why the dirty bomb will go off in Manhattan on the date 5-4. It has to do with the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. But let's continue. Union soldiers received $13 pay per month in the Civil War. When it was time to pay the soldiers of the 54th, the black soldiers, the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first regiment of black soldiers in the Civil War, they were officially offered as policy by the government $10 and were charged $3 for their uniforms. In protest, the soldiers, including the white colonel, Colonel Shaw, refused their pay. They famously refused their pay because they weren't getting paid the same as the other Union soldiers. This is a part of the story of the famous 54th Massachusetts Regiment, one of the most famous stories in the Civil War and a turning point in the Civil War. I think I'm explaining it in my writing, so I won't explain it just now. Let's continue. The U.S. government's official policy, in other words, the law, treated these soldiers as lesser humans. In context of God's prophetic signs, this is symbolism that points to how the mark of the Antichrist laws have and will treat a group of citizens as lesser humans. This historic dehumanizing event in U.S. history, involving a symbolic $13 that is part of the story of the 54th Massachusetts, is why on the 13th of April, the Tampa Bay, which symbolizes lightning, Rays, which hints at the Devil Rays because they were formerly named the Devil Rays, which is Antichrist symbolism, won their record 13th game out of 13 games, the first 13 games of the season, against the team Boston from Massachusetts. This is why the document leaker was arrested in Massachusetts on April 13th, the same day. The truth about the Ukraine war got out because of the leaker, and he was arrested. Those that don't go along with the mark of the Antichrist laws, because of the truth about the mark of the Antichrist, will be arrested. This is why the big news story of the day on April 13th, and the images that everyone remembers, is the arrest. The symbolic sign was an arrest. This is why God's signs demonstrated that April 13th hinted at Nisan 13, the date that regarded the oppressive laws against the Jews in Persia. I think I mentioned this earlier, but as I was explaining, and also in another video, April 13th hinted at the date Nisan 13, and it was 9 days after the literal Nisan 13 in the Hebrew calendar, April 4th. Both of those dates, President Trump, God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs, including judgment warning of the coming Antichrist, which is why his presidency came after the Antichrists, the 44th presidents, and precedes the return of the Antichrist, and why he was the 45th president, because the number 45 hints at the number 9, which symbolizes God's judgment. 45 hints at 4 plus 5 equals 9, and 45 is also a multiple of 9, and 45 is the 9th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 9th row is 45, and 45 symbolizes the number 9, just as the number 54, the inverse of 45, hints at the number 9. And so anyway, the date April 13th hinted at Nisan 13, as I explained, and that's because it hints at the oppressive minority laws in the book of Esther in the Bible that persecuted the Jews in Persia. In other words, that's another 13 reason for the 13. Okay, so as I wrote, this is a second reason why the document leaker's name is Jack Douglas Tehera. It points to Frederick Douglass, the eloquent advocate for blacks being allowed to fight in the Civil War. Frederick Douglass, who wanted to fight but was not allowed because of his age. He just wasn't of the fighting age to be in the Civil War, and so insisted that his 2 sons enlist in the 54th Massachusetts. And so the 54th Massachusetts regiment included 2 men named Douglas, and that's why the name Jack Douglas Tehera. But God emphasized this name Douglas because, as was explained, it connects to the mass shooting in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Broward County. Okay, the day he was arrested, Jack Douglas, was the day of the state of emergency in Broward County because of the once in 1,000 years unprecedented flooding on the same day. Okay, the story of the 54th Massachusetts is about slavery and freedom. This is a parallel with the current war on freedom and drive to enslave Americans by the totalitarian political cult of the left that is waging a war on freedom and democracy, whether they know it or not. Of course, most don't even know it because they're hypnotized. They're in a spell, which is what totalitarian movements are. Those that were following Hitler and those that were following Stalin were hypnotized. But this is explained in other videos, and that's explained elsewhere as well. Matthias Desmet, the clinical psychology professor from Ghent University in Belgium, has been explaining this, and what is going on right now, which is a totalitarian mass formation, mass psychosis movement, which is waging war, totalitarian, authoritarian, oppressive war on democracy. And during the COVID thing, every one of the Bill of Rights was trampled on, taken away, except for the Second Amendment, which they are working very hard at doing, the left. Okay, so this is what it's all about. This is the grand overarching storyline of everything, of the theme of the Bible. In fact, it's this story of freedom and slavery. I mean, that's the Christian worldview, that people are enslaved to sin and Satan, and as a result, by the law, his power over us is death. But to conquer Satan and his power over us because of sin and our bondage to Satan and slavery to Satan and sin in this world, which Satan is the ruler of, God took the form of a man and died and was resurrected in order to defeat Satan's power over death. And we are now able to leave Satan if we choose to follow Jesus, our liberator, out of captivity, which is the story of the Hebrews in Egypt, for example, and Moses being a type for Jesus. And so this is what it's all about, but that is what is in fact going on. So the secular materialist worldview has no idea about the reality of life. Everything they think they know about life is completely wrong. And in many cases, it's the complete opposite of the truth. But the truth is that the life, this world, this life, it's all spiritual. And there's a spiritual war that we are all in, each individual. And each individual is responsible for their own salvation. It isn't a collective salvation. It's not collectivist. It's not socialist. Socialism is in reality slavery. That's been demonstrated through history on purpose. That everything that's happened in history was for the purpose of God demonstrating the truth about life, including the experience in the 20th century with, for example, communism. Communism today is not like it was in the 1930s, but that same movement didn't go anywhere. It didn't disappear. It's morphed into something a little bit different, and it's kind of awkward to call them communists now, but it's that same drive for slavery and collectivism that's behind what's going on right now. And so that's why the elites in the left and the useful idiots that Stalin called, the people, the liberals, the Democrats that go along with, the average person that's on the blue team that doesn't really understand what they're doing, following these ideologues. But the ideologues are driven by their new form of communism, if you will. So they're leftist ideologies, but in truth, what's underlying that is a spiritual force, and it is satanic. Karl Marx, for example, was a believer in God, and he wrote about how he hated God, and his plays, he was a playwright, are about Satan. And he dedicated his work to Satan. And he saw his Communist Manifesto, for example, as the way to trample on Christians. And why? Because of their freedom. Because that's what life's all about, right? It's our free will that we have been given. And Satan hates the fact that we, humans, have been created in God's image with free will. And so his prerogative is to take away our free will, which he does, or attempts to do, with all sorts of lies and schemes and deceptions that seem good on the surface. Like, for example, if you fall for it, communism and the leftist ideologies of today, which is waging war on freedom and democracy. And so anyway, let's move on. I got a little bit political and philosophical there, but that was necessary, I think, because that's what's going on here with the reason why God is using the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, because the Civil War, if you will, is even embodied, symbolized by the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. This was the first black regiment in the Civil War, and prior to that, it was not by whites in the North, not known whether or not blacks could fight in the war, and because of inherent racism and prejudice. But that's not to say that all Northerners were like that, but there was this. But anyway, long story short, President Lincoln enacted the Emancipation Act, which then allowed the abolitionist governor of Massachusetts to immediately, because he was just waiting for the opportunity, to create the first black regiment. And so the 54th Massachusetts Regiment was made up of blacks, not from Massachusetts, because there weren't enough in Massachusetts. So they came from other states, and some even came from Canada. And anyway, they not only fought, but they proved to be valiant warriors. And in the famous historic Fort Wagner battle, they demonstrated that. And this was this story of this battle is told in the movie Glory, which I will explain later. God has used in his prophetic signs, this movie Glory. And what is absolutely astounding beyond words is that this date, April 13th, on which I have described these signs, these prophetic signs that are revealing and pointing to the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, which was depicted, the story of this 54th Massachusetts Regiment was depicted in this movie Glory. And this movie Glory, which won some Academy Awards and was nominated for others, was officially released on December 13th, 1989, exactly 400 months before April 13th, 2023. And that is so astounding because this number 400 is a number that God uses in his prophetic signs as symbolism for the slavery of the Hebrews in Egypt. Because as the Bible says, the Hebrews were afflicted in Egypt for 400 years. And then the Exodus, then their escape to freedom, as they were led by Moses, a type for Jesus. And so that's the reason for this 400 symbolism. Furthermore, another example is that 2020 was the 400th anniversary. November of 2020 was the 400th anniversary of the Pilgrims anchoring off of Cape Cod, the spiritual founding of America that was designed by God. And that's a whole other story, another whole rabbit trail to explain how important that is. But anyway, what was very significant that happened in November of 2020? Well, I'll leave it to you to figure that out. But something very significant happened in November of 2020 that is leading to the Antichrist, which is symbolized by, in the Bible, Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, whom the Hebrews were escaping. And so that's why 400. And so anyway, from the official release of this movie, Glory, it is exactly 400 months to April 13th. These are 2 13th days of the month. And again, the number 13 is symbolism for the Antichrist. Nimrod, a type for the Antichrist, was the 13th generation from Ham. Haman, another type for the Antichrist, persecuted the Jews or Hebrews on the 2 13th days of the month. And the 2 Antichrists are described in the book of Revelation in the 13th chapter. And we have this April 13th date with these 13 signs. And anyway, again, I have to say it again because I'm so amazed, but it's exactly 400 months, which is complete confirmation of what I am saying here, is this theme of slavery and freedom that God is telling, which is the overarching theme of the Bible and of life. And that's why God is pointing to the 54th Massachusetts Regiment with these prophetic signs on April 13th, exactly 400 months after the movie Glory was released. And so what I'll probably do is perhaps play a short history clip, maybe a 5-minute clip about the 54th Regiment. But it was a turning point because it turned out that this was necessary for the North to win, that blacks joined the effort in the war. And many thousands of black soldiers ended up fighting the South. And it was a pivotal turning point in their ability to beat the South, and overwhelmingly. And so that was the turning point. It was the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. In other words, it can't be emphasized enough how important the 54th Massachusetts Regiment was. But the overarching symbolism in it is this story, this ongoing story that overarches all of human history of this theme of slavery and freedom, which is the theme of the Bible. And that is what is, in fact, the reality of life. We are all slaves to Satan, whether we know it or not. We are slaves to Satan, and we belong to Satan. And his power over us is death. The wages of sin is death. We can now, because of Christ's death and resurrection, we can choose our way out of this if we would like to, through repentance and through the Holy Spirit cleansing our souls, our regeneration. We can be reborn if we have Christ's Spirit, but Christ's Holy Spirit, which holy is a Hebrew word that means set apart, it cannot force itself into us. That would be a symbolic, or that would be a sort of rape, if you will. And, no one would want to marry a robot or force themselves on, no ethical person anyway, would want to force themselves onto another person. And that likewise, God gives us the free will, and we choose God, and God chooses us, and chooses to have his holy, set-apart Spirit dwell inside us. But it's a choice. It's free will. And those that are practitioners of pagan religions and New Age spirituality, those that meditate and do yoga, it's like you're trying to force God's Holy Spirit into you. You haven't chosen God, and he hasn't chosen you. And Satan's power is extremely powerful. He has a lot of power. And he has the power to deceive people. And God, as the Bible says, sends people the deception they ask for. And if you think that you are God and that you are a part of God, and you just need to realize that you're God and experience your innate divine nature again, and this is the solution to humanity's crisis, etc. This is the opposite of the biblical worldview. They both can't be true. God is not the universe itself. He is separate from the creation. He's holy. He is the creator of the creation, right? And so anyway, my point is that I'm giving you the gospel. You have you can receive Christ's Holy Spirit and be born again with his Spirit if you choose it. And it's a real thing. It's not a metaphor. His Spirit will come into you. The Christians that talk about it, they're not just fantasizing. It's not an illusion. It's a reality. It's a real thing. And you'll know it when you receive the Holy Spirit as well. But anyway, that's the point. And so that's why the 54th Regiment, we can follow Christ out of slavery, bondage to Satan, whose power over us is death. If you refuse this gift of life, you will pay the price for your sin, because God is good and sin must be paid for. There is justice. Hitler doesn't get off the hook. And if you are a New Ager that thinks life is for lessons, and whatever we don't learn in this life, we somehow supposedly come back in another life and relearn the lessons, or something to that effect, and you don't think that Hitler or the child rapist and murderer will be punished, you have a really sick, twisted worldview. And also, you'll find out the hard way the consequences of that worldview when you go to hell, because everyone is a sinner and we're all in bondage to Satan. The masses that don't understand God and are biblical Bible illiterate will say things to the effect that we are all God's children, but this isn't the Bible. This isn't the Christian worldview. We can become adopted sons and daughters of God. But until then, we are not. We are children of Satan. And you'll remain with Satan. You'll pay the price for your sin, but then you'll also die the second death, as it says in the Bible. Some Christians will say you will be tormented forever, for all eternity, but that isn't the Bible. And furthermore, those that have a problem with that are not unjustified. There's good reason. That wouldn't be a righteous, just God either. But you will pay for your sin, and you will die the second death. And so the choice is yours. Okay, so let's continue. $13 and the 54th Regiment and the date 5-4, which hints at 9, because again, 54 is a multiple of 9 and 5 plus 4 equals 9. This makes this a pairing of 13 and 9. And as I've said before, God pairs numbers together as second and third witnesses to confirm matters. And God pairs 9 and 13 frequently. As I explained before, and again, if you recall, 9 times 13 is 117. And remember, the first 13 games of the season is 117 innings and on, as I explained earlier. And coincidentally, I go on to write about it right here. So Biden's mandate on 11/4 in 2021 was 99 years exactly after the discovery of King Tut's tomb in the Valley of Kings in Egypt. And Pharaoh in Egypt in the Bible is a type for the Antichrist. And this mandate for the thing was exactly 13 years after the election of Barack Obama, a pairing of 9 and 13, which identifies Obama as the Antichrist. And again, it was 9 months and 13 days after the home run king died after taking the mark. It's beautiful. So, but the point is why I say it again is because this 13 days, these signs on April 13th, the 13th of the month, etc., and are hinting at the $13 that the 54th Regiment refused. And that's why these signs connect to the date 5-4, which hints at 9. And so the signs on involving the number 13 on April 13th connect to this date 5-4, as I've been explaining, which hints at 9, which makes it a pairing of 9 and 13. The 13s on April 13th pair with 5-4 equals 9, which is what I just said, and confirm that April 13th was forepointing to May 9th, or May 4th. And again, the signs involving 13 on April 13th were for the purpose of adding to it the 21 days to get us to 5-4, which hints at the 54th Massachusetts Regiment that rejected their pay because they didn't get paid the $13 that they should have been paid. They were treated as unequal citizens. They were lesser humans, and it was because of oppressive laws. The 13th of April was also the 53rd anniversary of the Apollo 13 disaster on the 13th of April. And the launch of Apollo 13 was exactly 13 minutes after the hour. And the number 53, which is the reason for the 53 years connection, is the 16th prime number, which hints at 4 times 4 and identifies the Antichrist. The rescue in the Apollo 13 was in the lunar module, which they nicknamed the lifeboat. Right? This was symbolism for, well, a parallel with the Bible, with Noah's Ark, when Noah and his family were rescued in the lifeboat, the ark. But also, the moon symbolizes Christ. This is explained or demonstrated by God so overwhelmingly in his true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which again is only being explained on this channel. And that's why the significance of Apollo 13 and the lifeboat, because Christ is our lifeboat, our escape, our rescue from Satan. We are all children of Satan until we choose to be rescued willingly, because God won't force himself on you. We have the free will to follow Jesus or not, and follow God's ways as revealed in the Bible. Okay, so, as I wrote, he will lead the captives to freedom. And so that's why all of this ties to the Apollo 13 and the lifeboat and the rescue. That's the reason for all of this symbolism here. Because, again, Apollo 13 connects with 53 years to 13th of April and all of these signs involving 13, which ultimately connects to the $13 that the 54th Massachusetts were supposed to have been paid. As I wrote, yes, it's beautiful beyond words. I hope I've explained it well enough. In the description box below this video, I will leave a couple of links to history videos regarding the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. I highly recommend watching these videos and learning about this. This is the end of part 1. There is a part 2. We are only halfway through this story. Make sure that you watch part 2. I will also leave a link to part 2 in the description box below this video. I have also decided that the signs that occurred on May 4th, which are obviously, as you know by now, very, very, very important. But I have decided that this is part of the same story. And so the signs that occurred on May 4th, which is huge, because all of the part 1 and 2 are the signs that occurred on April 13th, which, as I have explained, pointed to May 4th, the date 5-4, which hints at the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. And so the question is, well, what happened on May 4th? The signs that occurred on May 4th, I have decided to explain in part 3. I have decided to make a part 3 to explain the signs that occurred on May 4th, rather than make the video with a different title, because it's the same story. And so there will be 3 parts. Part 2 will explain the rest of this story, which must be watched, regarding April 13th. And then part 3 will explain what happened on May 4th. It is amazing. Both of part 2 and 3 will be amazing.